All right, what is going on a Friday on ESPN 700? It is drive time. No Spence Checketts today. I am Porter Larson, of course, filling in for Spence on this Friday. Usual producer of this here program. And alongside me, as we do fairly often, my good friend, veteran of the radio market here in Salt Lake City, voice of the Salt Lake Bees. He is one, Tony Parks. TP, how are you, man?
I'm great.
Super Bowl.
I love this time of year, man.
Obviously, we'll get to more than that. We'll get to reactions of the NBA trade deadline, which is still top of mind. Of course, that came down yesterday, and we got to a lot of it on the show. But Tony and I, since we don't get to chat all that often, we're going to cover all of our bases today. We'll talk a little Utes. We'll talk some PGA. We got our PGA Tour leaderboard updates that we'll give you as the show goes along, and probably with each of our guests, whether they are football related or not, we're going to grill them on Super Bowl 59. It's the Chiefs. It's the Eagles. Of course, Kansas City with history on the line. No one has ever three-peated in the history of pro football on the Super Bowl side, and it's hard, right? You like to cheer for history, you like to see greatness, but you also like to cheer for those underdogs. Now, Tony, I don't know how you can really look at the Eagles as underdogs.
They're not.
In fact, they're probably favorites when you just look at it as the matchup.
Yeah, I think it's even right now.
But with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and the third straight Super Bowl on the line, that kind of changes the way you feel, I think, going into this game, right? Usually the best team, the best roster, the team that's going in there clicking a little bit more. You look at Patrick Mahomes, statistically, this is his least productive season in his career by a wide margin, probably the least complete roster around him. Yet here we are in February, talking about Patrick Mahomes, talking about Andy Reid, and talking about the Kansas City Chiefs, who have, Tony, if you disagree here, let me know. They have changed the way they play. Even though Patrick is still flashy, he still is able to, pull magic out of his hat when he needs to.
Right.
They have become the most efficient team. Maybe outside of the Eagles sometimes.
No, I mean, these
football
are the two
Yeah.
most efficient. You could look at both these teams and find flaws with what they do. And you could find something you don't like about them. That's fine. Efficiency is what it all boils down to. And to your point, I like that you're pointing out that Kansas City, this is not like some of those earlier championships where, my goodness, you had Tyreek Hill, you had just weapons galore and all of that. But what happens now is, think about Tom Brady's list of championships. Well, one time he took the 30th ranked defense to the Super Bowl and almost won it, by the way. He had at one time the most points scored in a Super Bowl by a losing team, where his team punted once and he threw for a record 505 yards.
Yep.
And he also had one Super Bowl run where his defense and special teams had more touchdowns than he did offensive touchdown drives. He only had 2 in an entire Super Bowl run, right? He also had an 18-0 season where it got spoiled at the end. So there's this mixed bag of what these teams are going to be over time. I'm going to get right to it. The last year's Super Bowl, people forget before that overtime drive to win it, their longest drive was 13 yards for a touchdown, right. 13 or 16. Muff punt, big break, there it was. And in this Super Bowl run this season, there has been far more talk about the referees and the timely call, and this is ridiculous. But, boy, you know what the Houston Texans never told you about? We couldn't figure out those blitz packages from the real MVP of the Kansas City Chiefs, Steve Spagnuolo. Because who beat the 18-0 New England Patriots in that Super Bowl? The defense coordinator, Steve Spagnuolo.
Yeah.
And who really locked it down to get the key timely stops to hold San Francisco to field goals last year? Steve Spagnuolo. And to me, in what will be a very close game, decided by 3 points, it'll come down to this guy with the key pressures that'll be put on that lead to an incompletion, a timely TFL, a sack. Maybe it takes him out of field goal range, or it makes him settle for a field goal. To me, that's going to be the difference. Steve Spagnuolo is like my Super Bowl MVP pick, and that's why the Chiefs are going to win. Kelsey will get the highlights. Taylor Swift will be on the screen. Patrick Mahomes will get all that. Andy Reid, they'll be talking about him among the greatest coaches ever. The MVP is the DC of KC.
And Tony, you talk about how you preface that idea. You talked about how dynasties have different ways to win.
Yeah.
You mentioned the different ways that Tom Brady got there and the Patriots got there to the finish line. And that is the only way, especially in the NFL, where your roster turnover, the salary cap stuff, getting there 3 years in a row is a feat in and of itself. Winning 3 times in a row, of course, has never been done.
Insane.
And to do it, you will have to do it in different ways. You will have to beat different teams. Those teams will come back with different personnel and different strategies to beat you, and then you'll beat them again. And then those teams will come back with another different coordinator and different strategy to beat you. And it's a chess game that Andy Reid just keeps winning. And you mentioned it. Steve Spagnuolo is a huge, huge part of why, with the roster, even though it's a good roster, let me be clear, I'm not poo-pooing the Kansas City Chiefs who are about to play in the Super Bowl's roster. It is not as good top to bottom as the Eagles roster. But the X factor is, of course, you have number 15 on one side. You have Andy Reid and his synergy, their teamwork, which is second to none as far as we've seen in pro football outside of, I guess, Belichick and Brady. And then you add in the X factor of a defensive play caller who can mask up the fact that you can no longer afford to pay a lot of elite defenders like you could 2, 3, 4 years ago. And, of course, when Patrick Mahomes was on a rookie scale contract. That's not a privilege you have anymore. So you've had to adjust and win in different ways. And, man, having maybe the best defensive play caller on your side as well, that goes a long way towards winning, especially late in the year in playoff situations.
Yep, I think it certainly does. So I'm excited about that. Right now, Kansas City has just coaching makes a big difference, man. I mean, you take away Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo, and you might have a team that contends. You might have a team that gets there deeper. Right. But those 3-point wins, those last-minute moments that bounce your way, those things can make all the difference in the world. And right now, they have what is undoubtedly a guy as a head coach who's on the Rushmore of greatest offensive minds in the history of the game. And you can argue him the best, by the way. And then you have a defense coordinator who he's like the modern day Bill Belichick when he was a DC, when he was with the Giants, beat the Bills, found ways to beat the 49ers, found ways to do those things against some great teams. So I'm fired up for this one. I think it's going to be an awesome game. Head coach, Steve, not so good. DC, he's as good as you can ask for.
And you know what? That's sometimes the reality of football coaches, right? There is especially the head coach position, there's a different way you have to carry yourself. There is almost a outside of the job way that you have to approach the players that are looking to you for leadership. When you're a coordinator, you can a lot of times just focus on the X's and O's, right? And that's something that as a Cowboys fan, I'm hoping is not the reality that we're facing with Schottenheimer, who I like as a coordinator. I think he's a good defensive mind. Head coach, we'll see. And that's just sometimes the reality on the football side, especially. We'll get to all of the Super Bowl storylines. Tony mentioned a bunch of them there, but a bunch of locals in the Super Bowl as well. We'll tell you who every single one of them is and what their connection to the Beehive State is. We'll get to the NBA trade deadline, recap what the Jazz did, what they didn't do, surprising a lot of folks around the league. And I'll say it's not for a lack of trying. We'll get into that as the show goes along. The Jazz are in Phoenix tonight, an 8 p.m. tip-off, of course, on this Friday ahead of Super Bowl weekend. Tony and I will probably go around the bases a little bit more on some other stuff. Utah Hockey Club is mid-season-ish, about 500. We're not going to get too much into the ice outside of Tony's expertise on the hockey side, but we will get into what is a hot topic right now, which is the branding of the team. Is it the Utah Hockey Club? Is it the Utah Mammoth? Is it the Utah Outlaws? Well, we'll know, of course, sometime in 2025, but we'll chat with you guys about that a little bit more and dive deep into that. Local college basketball updates, both on the BYU, the Utah side, the Utah State side. They're in action tonight as well.
Yeah.
Pro Football Hall of Fame announcements. Those came down over the course of the last 24 hours. We will give you PGA Tour leaderboard updates as well all throughout the show. Tiger committing back in action. He's going to be playing in the Genesis. And then from there, Tony, I'm sure we'll talk a little beast. We'll give you a space to let us know what's going on, what the offseason looked like, what we're looking forward to. The Big 12 football schedule release. There's MMA this weekend. There's a bunch of fun stuff that we'll get to over the course of the show. But as I mentioned, it's going to be heavy centric on the Super Bowl and, of course, the Chiefs and the Eagles going to battle on Sunday. ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, your home of the NFL playoffs. And on Super Bowl Sunday, we are live all day long with coverage brought to you by Westwood One. Tony Parks, Porter Larson filling in for Spence Checketts on this Friday. Before we go to a break, I want to remind you guys, ESPN 700 Cash Kickoff is here. Time for your shot to win $1,000 of cash to pay your bills. Text BILLS. That's BILLS to 508-777-1000. That's BILLS to 508-777-1000 for a chance to win $1,000 cash in this nationwide contest. Now, it is a nationwide contest, so some of you may be thinking, what's the worth? What's the worth? One of our listeners did win $1,000 last year. A listener of the drive texted in, and they won $1,000. So bills to 508-777-1000 for your chance to win $1,000 in your cash giveaway contest. Tony Parks, Porter Larson back on the other side with Thor Nystrom previewing Super Bowl 59. It's the Chiefs and the Eagles on Sunday. You can listen to all that right here on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. We'll head to New Orleans on Sunday as the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles go to battle Super Bowl 59. Of course, Kansas City looking for the first ever three-peat in the Super Bowl era. The Philadelphia Eagles looking for rematch success over the Kansas City Chiefs. Porter Larson, Tony Parks filling in for Spence on this Friday afternoon, and we'll start the afternoon talking some football with one Thor Nystrom. We'll talk some Super Bowl. We'll go to the Senior Bowl. We'll go all over the map with our guy Thor KU on Twitter, and of course you can find him on this station during the football season every once in a while. Thor, thanks for hopping on, man. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to be with you boys.
Let's start in New Orleans. Let's head down there for the big matchup, Kansas City, Philadelphia. It felt a lot of the year like this was maybe a matchup we were headed towards, Thor. I know a lot of people tried to talk themselves, and me included, into Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson being able to dethrone one Patrick Mahomes on the AFC side. The Eagles spent a lot of the year the betting favorite on the NFC side. Was this kind of what you expected coming into the year? Or how did that materialize as you watched this season come along? Did you feel it was a collision course, or are you surprised that we sit here in February looking at the Chiefs and the Eagles once again?
There was a certain inevitability to it. It felt like, yeah. I mean, it's team sport, right? So, like, you're like, well, it probably won't happen, right? Like, just because of the random variance. But, yeah, like, this is the matchup that we expected. So it's not a surprise whatsoever that we have it, much to the chagrin of the viewing public.
I've always liked that the NFL had no team go undefeated once the schedule expanded to 16 games. Now it's 17. No team's ever been able to three-peat. And once you start working in the industry, it could be a little bit different. I understand this. But were you the guy to root for or against history, kind of as you look at what a team could possibly achieve on Sunday?
No, I definitely root for history. Like, I'm cool. I mean, like, hey, as long as we have to have this matchup, you know what I mean? Like, I'm a Viking fan, like I would take I'd take a Super Bowl appearance in my lifetime,
right,
frankly, at this point. So it's, but like, as long as we have purchased a ticket for this ride. So as long as we have to be on it on Sunday, yeah, I'm going to be rooting for history.
Tony and I were talking about this a little bit as the show opened up. Is Kansas City's ability now to win a little bit differently than we've seen. Now, they still have the ability to do the high-flying, flashy stuff that we're used to from Patrick Mahomes. But what you're seeing now is a little more efficient, creative play calling, leaning on your defense when you need to. And, of course, Steve Spagnuolo on the other side is helping with a lot of that. How have you watched the evolution of the Kansas City Chiefs and how they've been able to tweak certain things while still keeping the core of what made them a Super Bowl contender intact?
It's a fascinating progression because, as you boys recall, when they drafted an unknown project quarterback out of Lubbock, Texas, named Patrick Mahomes, the book on him initially was, this is a raw swashbuckler who all he's ever going to want to do is just chuck the ball downfield. You're never going to be able to teach him how to do the rest of this stuff. And the NFL, once Mahomes initially was succeeding, they're like, yeah, we're going to take away the explosive plays, and then you're not going to have your Superman cape anymore. And his game evolved. The Chiefs as a team have evolved as well. And there's not one player that you can, like of his weapons, any of them, you take them away, they're able to go to other things, right? It's not a team that just beats you down the field. It's not a team that just beats you with efficiency or with one concept or one player. They are able to beat you in a million different ways. You get into a shootout, great. You want to do a low-scoring game, great. We can beat you literally whatever way that you want to come in here and play. We're going to beat you at your own game. And so the evolution of that has been cool, and I think their quarterback Patrick Mahomes is an example of that. He's just a small. He's one of the grains of sand on that beach.
Yeah, kill them by 1 point. That's kind of been the motto of this team if they need it to be that way. In my opinion, Steve Spagnuolo was the MVP of the Super Bowl last year, and I think one of the biggest variables in this game Sunday, those timely pressures like he had, against Houston, the timely pressures he's had in these championship runs to win some key downs, minimize some damage, and keep the odds in Kansas City's favor? How big of a variable do you see him playing in this game with Philadelphia needing to get cash instead of coins on some of their more productive drives?
Utterly enormous, and your point is well taken. Like his special gift is like he understands at this level, you know, the every little small thing, throwing a timing off of a concept of the opponent by even a fraction of a second,
right?
It improves your odds so much to turn what could be a positive play or even an explosive play into either a zero or a, you know, like whatever. You flip the odds so much just by, can we get a brief millisecond of confusion, or can we speed up the process just a little bit? He's really, really good at all that sort of stuff. And obviously it starts to juice the odds on a given play, and then over the ocean of the plays that make up a game, that's how you start to see some of these different things swing. He's also really good. I think, you know, the game in, game out situational stuff. There's some coaches where it's just like, this is my system, and it's like, you guys are going to, you know, figure it out. Like, you're going to do my system. But I feel like he puts every individual player into, you know, the spots for them to succeed, but then also opponent specific. You know, there's going to be all sorts of exotic coverage looks, exotic blitzes that are designed merely just for the paradigm of the game that they are in, Jalen Hurts, and the way that the Eagles play offensive football. So it's one of those things where it's like the chess match, the game within the game is going to be just as entertaining as the game, and hopefully just as entertaining as the halftime show and the commercials as well.
Thor, when you look at, obviously you mentioned the chess match that we're going to see. When it comes to Andy Reid, when it comes to Spagnuolo, when it comes to the Philadelphia side, the play calling is always going to be creative. It's always going to, you know, you're going to see, as you mentioned, some exotic looks. You're going to see, I sometimes I don't even like to call it trick plays when it's designed and run often and so well, like Kansas City and Philadelphia does. You know, a lot of the times they're more misdirection plays than they are trick plays, and they're really good at those. But when you look at the X's and O's, the chess game you're going to see, how do you see the big picture of this game playing out? And what I mean by that is time of possession. How do you see Andy Reid going at this game, you know, maybe trying to maximize possessions, while Philadelphia on the other side trying to hit them hard with a heavy dose of Barkley and Hurts, and trying to minimize the possessions that Kansas City gets and lean on that Philly defense? How do you see that playing out between the two teams, kind of trying to balance the levels of power there? Because it's an interesting one to me when you look beyond the X's and O's and more the big picture strategy of addressing this one.
Yeah, if I had to guess, I would say the first quarter the first quarter is going to be like a Floyd Mayweather fight.
Right.
I think you're going to get two animals that are just circling each other, and you know, you're sort of trying to gauge like, you know, I just think you're going to get a conservative ethos initially. I don't think the haymakers are going to start to get tossed until the second half. I think initially it's like, we cannot turn the ball over, and let's go out there and get our feet under us and see what we're up against here. But yeah, I would expect a more conservative first quarter, and then maybe you try to flower out the playbook in the second quarter. But I like both of the offenses. I don't think you see it start to open up until the second half, and that's where I think those offensive play callers are going to get deep into their bag, and we're going to see some interesting things there.
Well, I think you're 100% right about that, because the last time these two teams played, the team that scored the most offensive points actually lost the game, which was one of the rare times that's ever happened in Super Bowl history. So to your point, I could see that happening. Look, my opinion on Andy Reid, 15 and 20 years ago, the sports radio used to get in arguments with this all the time, friends, NFL buddies, stuff like that. I always thought that he was wildly over-criticized while completely overachieving with some of those Philly teams that he had with McNabb. And then I thought he was overachieving by maximizing what he could get out of Alex Smith, who was a good quarterback, but I thought he was, you're going 12-4 and hosting divisional round playoff games. I just didn't think they had the ultimate Super Bowl roster either in Philly or there in KC pre-Mahomes. Now, all of a sudden, Hall of Fame quarterback, Hall of Fame tight end, and a guy that I think is undoubtedly on the Rushmore of greatest offensive minds, maybe the best offensive mind in football. The history of this game now is starting to show that historic results exist with that. Are you of the belief that, Andy Reid evolved into this, or that he truly had so much of this gift and now he has everything that goes with it to where it's undoubtable that he stands at the top?
I think, first of all, he's going to go down as one of the best head coaches in NFL history.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'm going out on a limb with that. And I think there's been evolution with a certain amount of things, but I think he's a prodigy. He's a coaching prodigy. He's an offensive mind prodigy, right? Like, and his gift is putting his players into the best situation to succeed. But, in particular, that quarterback position. And his game planning that Andy Reid has done, and that what he's done with the quarterbacks over the time. You could say, he got to work with a Hall of Fame quarterback here. It's a Hall of Fame quarterback that he banged the table that his team traded up for.
Right.
And when they made that selection, everyone was like, what are you doing?
Yeah, they were not going to select him.
Yeah. Why are you taking the raw guy who comes from the system where no quarterback ever succeeds, and you just took him over Deshaun Watson, who we saw win national titles and beat Alabama and all this sort of stuff. Like, they not only – it was the conviction of, no, that's the guy, and then developing – again, people forget this. Like, because after the fact, now Patrick Mahomes, he's football god now. And so nobody remembers going back there. But at the time, it was like, how are you ever going to get this guy to stop playing playground ball, stop playing hero ball? Like, this is a bridge to nowhere. Andy Reid was the one identified that guy, and then you built him up, starting with the plan initially of you brought up Alex Smith before. It's like, yeah, for the first year, we're just going to have you learn, right? And then you went through with that, and they made again, people forget this. It was not a popular, universally accepted decision of we're going to trade Alex Smith and open the job up for this guy that most people don't think is going to succeed in the NFL. But Reid did all of that. He was behind all the development of that. And then this evolution that we talk about with Mahomes' game and the Chiefs offense as a whole, the Chiefs franchise, he was the driving force of all of it. So, I mean, it's like, yeah, you look back and it's like, oh, now he's got all these great players. He was the one that developed them all.
Yeah, I mean, you can't argue with that. Obviously, there's a lot of local ties that we're going to get to, Thor, with the Super Bowl, but we'll leave that for a different segment. Let's transition over to kind of your specialty, which is on the NFL draft side and some of the prospects that we saw at the Senior Bowl. There are, 5 or 6, maybe 7 guys if you want to dive deep into it on the Utah roster that are receiving looks. Of course, Jalen Royals up at Utah State. We can go down to the BYU side as well. But give us a little rundown of what you saw at the Senior Bowl. First on the local side, and then we'll maybe get into the very top prospects on your board as well.
I got to start with Jalen Royals because I really like Jalen Royals. Jalen Royals went into the Senior Bowl as my number 1 receiver at the event.
Okay.
And he wasn't the best receiver on the field there. There was a couple of guys I thought in the one-on-ones were a little bit more impressed, like Jalen Noel from Iowa State. Jack Besh, of course, was a big story there as well. But Royals, in the context that he performed that week, I thought he was extremely impressive. And that context was kid who got knocked out for the season in October with a foot injury. He was not 100% at Mobile, like in Mobile, and it was not a certainty that he was going to even participate in the event weeks or certainly like a month beforehand. His rehab, it was all designed of I'm getting back active to get in front of the NFL and prove a point that I belong. So he did as much as he could to get ready for it. Was not 100%, might have been 85, 90%, but he still went out and he performed really, really well. His movement is even better than what we saw out there. But again, for where he was beating all these power 4 defensive backs, team drills, the one-on-ones, not 100%. He appears that, at least with what he was telling us, that for the NFL Combine, he expects to be, dang near 100%. So he's going to get to go out and show his athleticism. For a kid who is as well built as he is, he moves around really well. So I'm very interested. I know the NFL is very interested to see how he tests, but he acquitted himself really well out there. He told me that the NFL has been talking to the teams that he had talked to initially. Now, this was on Wednesday. It was in the middle of the Senior Bowl week. I'm sure he had more conversations after that, but he said most of the teams that he had talked to that point were talking to him as a big slot in the NFL, that they saw him as as a big sort of fortified efficiency type slot. I know that's a kid who played on the boundary more at Utah State the year and a half when he was dominating. He does have the experience in the slot as well, so I thought that was kind of interesting. But Jalen Rowe is going to start in the NFL for a really long time, and I think he's going to be a day 2 pick in April.
Yeah, man. Obviously, he's coming out of that Utah State pipeline. That Devin Tompkins. You can go down the list of players that have come out of Utah State either to the NFL draft or even if they haven't got to the next level, were really, really productive at Utah State. Kyle Cefalo, the wide receiver coach, a huge part of that now at Cal after the coaching change this offseason. Thor, on the Utah side, who's the prospect that either from the Senior Bowl or just on the class is catching your eye from the Crimson side, the Utes roster in 2025? There's 4 or 5 guys that, I don't think there's going to be any early round picks, but some guys that are definitely in the running for NFL draft slots and definitely undrafted free agent market.
Yeah, as far as Keithy is interesting, although I don't know where we're going to be there.
Right, it's the medical stuff with him. It's just hard to get a read.
Yeah, there wasn't as many Utes that were jumping off the field there in Mobile. So yeah, the guy for the class though that I'm interested to see in Indianapolis is Lander Barton, because I think that kid is really, really good. For the class as a whole, but as a kid came in to this season with round 2 grades from the NFL, so we'll be interested to see that. But not as many, as the Utah State kid that was standing out there in Mobile. Yeah,
that's kind of the returns that we got here in Salt Lake City. What stands out about Lander Barton? He's got the size, kind of a prototypical linebacker in that sense. A lot of production, a lot of film at Utah. I will say some of his earlier film at Utah might look better than some of his late film because of the absence of his partner at linebacker, Karene Reed, who I may ask you about as well. But what does stand out about Lander? Of course, 6'4", 240 pounds, an athletic kid for sure. What stands out from his skill set at the next level?
Yeah, it's a big athletic kid who has versatility, that you can move him around. He sticks with his assignment and coverage. He comes downhill well. It's a versatile skill set and a versatile usage player that you can move around. You obviously the box stuff, you can send him off the edge. And like I said, I like him running around in coverage as well. The one thing with him is that and it's one thing too, unfortunately, that he can't address in his pre-draft process, because it just is what it is. There's an elevated missed tackle right there,
yep.
And that would be something where if I was, like in the team interview, it's something that I would want to talk through with him. That's one sort of, slight concern that I have there. But, as far as the sort of the toolbox coming in, just on the surface there, it's obviously NFL caliber all day, and then his ability to do all these different things on the field and to be effective no matter where he's deployed. That's what I'm interested in. But yeah, we're going to have to work on that tackling technique, Lander, just a little bit.
Who jumped out to you, shocked you the most, either direction, either good or bad, with everything in Mobile?
On the negative side, and maybe it's not like shock, although how bad it was a surprise, was Jalen Milroe. It's a guy that we were hoping, if this guy has a big time pre-draft process, this could be Anthony Richardson. And obviously the things that he had struggled with on the field, you got the peaks and the valleys with Jalen Milroe. Some games it looked like he should be the first overall pick. And then there's some games it looked like this guy shouldn't be playing quarterback again. The Oklahoma game would be a great example from this past season. And he goes out in Mobile, and you're hoping you can see the physical tools for sure. 225 pounds. He's going to run in the 4.3s later this month. He is fabulously skilled runner, with all the athleticism in the world. And then he has the huge arm. But the week starts out with him, the measurements. He would have one of the smallest pair of hands to ever start in the NFL during the modern era. Interestingly enough, there's only been a couple under 9 inches in the NFL hand size. One of them is Michael Vick, And that essentially, I think, is Milroe's skill set as a right hand, just in terms of the starter kit there. The problem is not refined as a thrower at all. Vic wasn't coming out of Virginia Tech, but he was more so than Milroe, and he saw the field better. Milroe, what we saw with him down on the field, he was slow through the progressions. He was late to get rid of the ball. And so he would telegraph where the thing was going. He wanted to see the receiver wide open. That's when he'd start to throw. Then he would be telegraphing it so the players could, the defenders, they could get a jump on the ball. And then even then, the accuracy wasn't always true. So it's like, the timing concepts, you think about projecting him to the NFL, this is why Kalen DeBoer got frustrated with him last year. It's like he can do things that you can't teach, but the things where you keep the defense off of your fastball, it's the timing, efficiency sort of concepts that the general fan, I think, just takes for granted. But, this was something we talked about last spring with Caleb Williams, because we never saw it at Oklahoma. We never saw it at USC. Him doing the timing, anticipatory things, the thing of like, your tight end, your inline tight end, he's going to run 5.5 yards upfield. He's going to put his foot in the dirt right exactly in this spot. He's going to cut to the left, and you have to throw that ball right before he cuts, because right when he turns around, that ball needs to be on his hands, right? We've never seen him do it before. We have never seen Jalen Milroe do it, and I think Kalen DeBoer, I think there was a realization of I don't think I can get him there in a year, because what I was told was Milroe was potentially interested in returning to Alabama, and there was a talk after the season, and I think Kalen DeBoer wanted a pocket passer there. So, and Jalen Milroe didn't want to transfer. So that we're here where we are. I'm hopeful that he gets an opportunity in the NFL, but if he doesn't really turn around the narrative in Indianapolis, he's not a first-round pick. You could see sort of more the Malik Willis thing, where it's not a franchise that is going to invest in him and then build an offense around him like you saw Baltimore Ravens do with Lamar Jackson, put him in a position to succeed. But you fall to, in Malik Willis's case, you fall to round 3, and then they want you to run the Ryan Tannehill offense with the Titans, and it's like, I'm not Ryan Tannehill. Let me do Malik Willis things. Let me do Lamar Jackson things. But, he was not put in a position to succeed there. That is my fear for Jalen Milroe, but we still got a couple months left of the pre-draft process, so he still has time, to an extent, to turn the narrative around.
Well, I think that's a great breakdown of him, too. I think it was Brock Osweiler in that bowl game they had against Michigan this past year. He showed how, the sacks were happening or the miscues were happening, but then he was also able to show the play that should have been there and the decision that should have been made and how explosive plays were in place, and he was not able to make them. I thought that was glaring, and I didn't know if that was a one-off or just a bowl game situation, but to hear you talk about it, it sounds like it was obviously much of the same.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Thor,
I think there's something that's endemic there for sure.
We'll check back in as after the Super Bowl wraps up, and of course as the draft process rolls along. Thor, appreciate your time as always. On the way out, let's if you're comfortable, give us a final score prediction for Sunday, and let the folks know where they can go find your off-season content.
I will say for Sunday, I'm going to say I'm going to go lower scoring. I'll say 20-17 Chiefs.
Okay.
And then as far as my work, you can find it at Fantasy Life. You can find me on Twitter at ThorKU. And boys, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Excited to talk to you more about these draft prospects as we go forward here.
Yeah, we'll dive deep into the draft with you a little bit later on. Appreciate it, Thor.
Appreciate you, boys.
Back on the other side, a little PGA Tour leaderboard update. Thor Nystrom, brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. For the big game, Patrick Mahomes needs only one passing yard for you to win that free square. Of course, some of the other options. Will Saquon Barkley go over 112.5 yards? Jalen Hurts over 215.5 passing yards? Get in on it. Prize Picks. PrizePicks.com. $50 matched when you use the promo code ESPN700 to get instantly after you play your first $5. That's the promo code ESPN700 to play after your first $5 entry at Prize Picks. Run your game all season long. Back on the other side, PGA Tour leaderboard update, Howard Beck in the 3 o'clock hour, Paul Pugmire, and more right here on Utah's #1 Sports Talk. It is The Drive. No Spence Checketts today. Porter Larson, Tony Parks filling in on a Football Friday. ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Welcome back in. The Drive on ESPN 700. No Spence Checketts today. I am Porter Larson. Tony Parks alongside me filling in on this Friday afternoon. A quick PGA Tour leaderboard update for you before we go to a break and turn it over to Howard Beck talking some hoops, NBA trade deadline, and some Utah Jazz. The PGA Tour is in Phoenix for the Waste Management Open, and of course, we will take you live to that throughout the show and give you updates from it. Paul Pugmire joins a little bit later on, but Thomas Detry, currently your leader at 12 under. Alex Smalley at 10 under. Tom Kim at 9 under. They are the current podium, if you will. The projected cut is at 2 under. And if you're looking for the locals, well, Tony Finau not in action. Patrick Fishburne looking like he's not going to make the cut. Not a whole lot of local action at the Waste Management Open in Phoenix. We'll get back to that a little bit later on. Paul Pugmire will join us from Utah Golf Radio, and we'll go from there. The Utah Golf, Uinta Golf PGA Tour leaderboard update brought to you by Callaway this time around. Experience the future of performance with new shaping materials and the AI 10X Smart Face, delivering up to 8 yards longer with even more forgiveness at Uinta Golf. 560 East, 21st South in Sandy, Riverdale, and Orem. That is your PGA Tour leaderboard update brought to you by our friends at Uinta Golf. Tony Parks, you golfed yet this year?
I have not.
Cold. It's a little cold. It's a little rainy today.
Yeah, I have not. I actually got every year for the holidays, I make sure to get my dad. I go to Uinta Golf, and I get him that golf pass.
There we go.
Yeah, it sets him up. It's got the booklet, everything he needs, and he looks forward to that more than anything. So I golf here and there. I don't go as often as I'd like to, but that guy, he's out and about all the time. So anytime it comes to anything for golf, Uinta Golf, that's my one-stop shop.
Some more golf a little bit later on the show. Paul Pugmire drops by, and we'll talk Tiger returning for the Genesis and give you another scoreboard update. But on the other side, we're recapping the NBA trade deadline, what the Jazz did, what the Jazz didn't do, what else happened across the league, and, of course, a look ahead to the rest of the NBA season. We won't go too far without talking some football, though, on this Football Friday Super Bowl weekend as the Chiefs and the Eagles go to battle for the big one. You can hear that on ESPN 700 right here, your home of the NFL playoffs. The Drive continues next. Porter Larson, Tony Parks filling in for Spence on this Friday. It's ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Drive time on a Friday afternoon, ESPN 700. Porter Larson, Tony Parks filling in for Spence Checketts here. A little bit of a football Friday, as of course Super Bowl 59 awaits us on Sunday. But we'll take a little bit of a break from the football conversation, talk a little hoops with our guy Howard Beck of The Ringer. And Howard, I know that Spence tries to always get hip with you, I think is what he calls it. I'm not the guy for that. He always comes to me to ask like what the young people are saying, and I tell you, I don't have it for some reason. There's a disconnect there. Any idea? Any idea of the song we brought you in with? Do you have any? Do you have any feelings on that one?
So a little embarrassing on my part because I know the song, which is Signs, but the one that I'm most familiar with, of course, was the cover in the 80s by Sacramento rock band Tesla.
Let's go!
And I don't know the original artist, which I should know, so shame on me.
You should not be embarrassed by that answer because, number one, this has been a topic on this show quite often because Tesla was my late father's, favorite band.
Wow.
There are autographs, there are pictures, I've been to... Don't even have a count. I've been to 20-plus Tesla shows, Howard Beck.
Wow. Yeah. There's a piece of trivia or just factoid that I just did not anticipate in a million years. I never saw Tesla. They broke out when I was still living in Davis, not far from Sacramento, when I went to UC Davis.
Uh-huh.
That was their time. That was their heyday, but I never saw them. They had some bangers. I liked them.
The five-man electrical band is the original. But Signs by Tesla is the one that actually got a little more run, and Spence always gives me a little grief because it's kind of I wouldn't say guilty pleasure because I think Tesla put out some really, really good songs, but it's the only band that I would in any circumstance associate myself with. It's like the hair metal type of outfit.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, I've seen Tesla live in Wendover, in Sturgis, in Vegas, as the designated driver for several of these. But yeah, there you go. Some trivia for you.
Spence would then say something like, "Man, you should check these guys out. The Fire Rabbits. You're gonna love them." I'm like, "Who?"
Some Northeast jam band.
What? You saw them at a coffee shop. You've never heard them say. Who are we talking about?
All their songs are 12 minutes long, and they sound like Dave Matthews trying to whistle. Yeah.
Yeah,
no offense.
I can't handle that either. The jam band thing just doesn't do it.
All right, Howard Beck. Now that we've got 7 minutes on Tesla out of the way, my father is looking down in pleasure there. I got to ask, Super Bowl. How much does it move the radar? I know you're not a football guy, but this is as much a pop culture event as it is a football game.
Yeah, I don't care.
I knew it.
I don't even know if I'll watch. The NFL was my favorite sport as a kid, but in adulthood, it's dropped off the radar for me. So yeah, I might just binge something on Netflix on Sunday. Who knows?
Despite that, I'm still going to make you give us a final score. Everyone's doing it.
Not happening. 3-0.
3-0. Which way? Philly? Kansas City?
Let's say Kansas City. Why not?
3-0 Chiefs. I love it. Howard Beck.
Go Taylor Swift's team. That's there's my contribution.
Go enter that with your bookie 3-0 and tell them Howard Beck sent you. All right, Howard. We'll get to the NBA draft or the NBA trade stuff, the latest on the hoop side, and we got to start with the big news of the week. We haven't spoken to you since. Luka Doncic was traded to the Los Angeles Lakers, a kind of a franchise resetting move, an NBA market resetting move, and the talk of the league for this week and probably the focus of a lot of the league going forward for now. I want to get your read on what you thought when you saw that notification, or I guess when you started hearing whispers of it, Luka Doncic to LA for Anthony Davis, and of course we'll get to the Jazz involvement and the pieces around it as well.
I mean, like everybody else, just absolutely shocked, and frankly, it's been almost a week. I'm still shocked. I mean, people around the league are still kind of in this same state too, where it's like, did that really happen? How is this possible? Why did the Mavericks make what seems like such a rash move not only to trade him at all, which is just unprecedented for a player of his caliber at that age, but to trade him for as little as they got in return. And, sometimes your opinions soften on a really shocking move, an unexpected move. It might soften over time. You get a little more context. You get a little bit more, explanation. You kind of take a step back and take a deep breath and you say, well, maybe but that's not the case this time. There's no matter how many different ways you look at this, how many times you try to reassess or give them the benefit of the doubt in Dallas, it still doesn't make any sense. And when it happened, my thought was, look, there's nothing that we've heard in the wake of this that we didn't already know around the league in terms of Luka being kind of a diva, Luka being kind of a pain in the butt, Luka having bad work habits, Luka being difficult to play with for some players. All of those things were true, but he's still one of the best players on earth and took you to the finals just, less than a year ago. So none of this is new, and none of those things I think justify deciding to trade him at age 25, and none of it justifies trading him without having at least tried to test the market and see what more you could get, because they just didn't get enough. Frankly, they didn't even get enough from the team they traded him to, from the Lakers, because Anthony Davis, while a great player, it cannot single-handedly carry a team the way that Luka Doncic can. And, they didn't get the Lakers 2031 pick. They didn't get swaps. They didn't get, Dalton Connect or Austin Reeves. They should have gotten everything. When you're trading an MVP candidate who's 25 years old, you should get everything. And they got far short of that. So, it's still shocking, and it sets up the Lakers really nicely for their post-LeBron years, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think the return is what shocks me the most, right? If you want to explain to me that you don't want to invest the supermax into a player you're not sure is serious about the length of his career, and listen, I think some of that is maybe unwarranted on Luka, because at the end of the day, while he does come into camp overweight, he does have some of those issues. By springtime, Howard, by NBA Finals time, he's right there. By Western Conference Finals time, he's right there performing and being productive. And this is a results-oriented business. So I kind of scoff at some of those excuses for why he was moved on. I want to ask you, though, of all the conspiracies, of all the reasoning, of all the blaming of Nico Harrison and the talk of it, why have we heard almost nothing about the head coach, Jason Kidd, a guy who, from what I hear in circles around the league, very much likes to have his fingerprints on basketball operations more than he publicly puts out?
He definitely had his fingerprints on this one. It may not be evident, but, the word around the league that I heard was that, and it's interesting because the press conference, the way Nico said it was like, no, I didn't bring him in, but I know what Jason wants. In terms of didn't bring him in on the decision making on the trade itself. Right. I have no doubt in my mind that Jason Kidd also had his concerns with Luka. Like whatever the concerns of the front office were, I think were shared on the bench. But that's the way you're supposed to operate as a front office, right? Like don't put your coach in the midst of all of this. It's your decision. You take it. I don't know that Jason is the one who pushed for this, but I have no doubt that he approved of it. I'm going to pop inside, guys, and just throw my bag down real quick, and then
no problem. Do your thing.
Give me 30 seconds to get through security. I'll be right back.
Yep, no problem.
Called a 30-second timeout.
Yeah, can you? That's the I forget the official term. Just on the shoulders, right?
30. Yeah.
30-second timeout.
It doesn't
for
go
Howard
to
Beck.
media though. Doesn't go to media. Just stay here.
And Howard's
me,
back here.
I'm with you. Every bit as surprised about the fact that they didn't get as much back.
Right.
Clearly, there's something under the hood there where the Mavericks felt like this is going to get worse before it ever gets better. Last year was the best it can get. It was not happy. It was not great, although the results were good. Now the results aren't good, and there's some difficulty going on here. So to move on, like the Jazz did with, say, Donovan and Rudy, look what they got for that. I mean, they got an insane amount. If you don't think you could have been able to get something like that in exchange for Luka, I mean, that's nuts.
That's a
shocker.
That's where I feel like there's got to be more that we're going to learn about that was under the hood, right? More we learn about maybe of Luka, of what's going on behind the scenes, because although there are whispers, there have been stuff, about the way he approaches the game, nothing to the level of trading him and not opening it up for bidding. That's a crazy one to me. Howard, Jimmy Butler, the move finally materialized, and he is now in Golden State. You look across the continent, and the Heat now have 3 All-Stars under the age of 30. So Pat Riley, in some ways, gets what he wanted there. Give us your latest on what the Heat made happen, and Jimmy Butler finally getting out of Miami, but not to Phoenix as he was rumoredly trying to force.
Yeah, I mean, the Butler one is fascinating just because of the way that we got there, right? And also, not for nothing, but I'm standing in the bowels of Barclays Center where the Heat are arriving any second now to play the Nets. Maybe I'll just hand the phone to Pat Riley in a minute.
Yeah, can you get him on the show for us? Is that something?
I'll effort it. We'll see what we can do.
Thanks.
So, listen, I might be in the minority in this one. I love the move for the Warriors to get Jimmy Butler. There's not much lifespan left in the Curry era. So whatever time is left of him being able to still play at a really high level, which he is, you got to get him whatever help you can. And, Jimmy Butler's a winner. He might be a pain in the butt. He might cause a lot of ruckus when things aren't going well, and especially when he has contractual beefs with the organization. But the Warriors gave him his 2-year extension, so the contract is not an issue. And the guy's a winner. The guy plays his butt off and at both ends, and the Warriors badly needed somebody else who can initiate the offense and get in the teeth of the opposing defense. And, Jimmy Butler's going to draw fouls. He's going to get in the lane. He's going to distribute. He's a great passer. He's going to take a lot of the pressure, I think, off of Steph Curry. I love the move for the Warriors. And for the Heat, look, obviously things had run their course. They didn't get a ton back, but the real point of the exercise for them at a certain point was just to alleviate the headache and move on. And, they were able to do that.
How surprised were you that the Suns were not able to move Bradley Beal?
Not at all. There's nobody around the league who thought that Bradley Beal was getting moved. Nobody around the league thought that somebody was going to be willing to take on his contract, especially with the no trade clause in it. And yeah, look, the Suns, starting with the Wizards made a very, very, very bad contract, when they, first gave Bradley Beal the contract with the no trade. And the Suns made a very, very bad deal in deciding to take on that contract and to not insist on taking the no trade clause out as part of the deal of acquiring him. So they're stuck with it. And there's nobody in the league who's going to want to acquire that contract. So the Suns have really screwed themselves.
The Cleveland Cavaliers, I don't think, made this splash of a move that turned as many heads. But to get DeAndre Hunter, at least it is something that I think does move them a positive step in the direction that they want to, while still trying to build their championship roster. What were your thoughts about kind of the move and what they were able to receive as they're on that mission to be the best in the league?
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you're weighing everything or assessing everything that went on in the last week, clearly, like, the Lakers are the winners of the trade deadline by getting Luka, and then even by adding Mark Williams at center. On top of that, I think, people will disagree on the Warriors thing, but I think they're up there. I love the Spurs getting De'Aaron Fox. But the next tier after those big splashy moves, I think, is the Cavs getting DeAndre Hunter. I mean, they're, the Cavaliers obviously best record in the East already, having a great season. He's got size. He's having a career best year shooting the three. And if you're the Cavaliers, as much as you're probably very proud of and happy with what your team's accomplished so far, everything is going to be about, can we beat the Celtics in the spring? That's it. Like, all due respect to the Knicks, the Bucks, and whoever else may emerge in the East as an opponent. But it's really about, what do you do with Tatum and Brown? Can you beat the Celtics? And they've been spanked a couple times pretty handily by Boston. And, getting another big body out there and who can also stretch the defense at the other end is a plus. So nice move by the Cavaliers. I think it does have some risk. It does come with some risk, only in that the vibes are great there, right? Like chemistry is really important. These guys obviously all love playing together, and Levert was playing really well off the bench for them. And so you change up the chemistry a little bit when you change up the personnel. So I don't think it's completely without risk, but I like the move.
All right, Howard. Rapid fire, if you have to. We'll get your thoughts on some local ties here. First off, the Jazz. They get the Suns 2031 unprotected first, 5 total second-round picks. They bring in KJ Martin, and they do all of that while helping facilitate a few trades around the league and only really getting off of a few contracts that they didn't have any intention of staying with anyway. Your thoughts on the Jazz return, although minimal, and what it says for the strategy going forward?
It's been interesting actually to watch this in terms of the way the Laker fans are kind of portraying. It's like Laker fans are gleeful that they feel like Rob Pelinka got over on Danny Ainge by making this deal for Luka with the Jazz and Danny Ainge, noted Laker hater, hated former Celtic
right.
Danny Ainge. I have a lot of Laker fans in my life, and they are all gleeful, and social media has been as well, about Danny Ainge presumably unwittingly helping the Lakers get Luka Doncic. So I don't know how that part's playing in Utah, but it's playing very interestingly in LA. I don't know that, look, nothing the Jazz did obviously was meant to move the needle. They're just continuing to kind of mark the time and, keep their heels cooled and add assets as they can. Am I surprised that they didn't move off of, whoever, Clarkson or Sexton or Walker Kessler, whoever? Like, I know the entire roster is in trade rumors perpetually. But there wasn't really, I didn't really pick up on anything around the league about anybody really aggressively going after any of those guys. So, all attention turns to, I think, the lottery and the draft and what the Jazz do this offseason. And are they keeping Lauri Markkanen, or are they trying to acquire somebody to play with him? He becomes trade eligible again when the season ends, and who knows? Maybe they're moving off of him too. But it's hard to get a gauge on what exactly the plan is, other than stockpile assets, keep tanking, hope to get Cooper Flagg or somebody great in the draft, and then reassess when July hits.
And yeah, worst case scenario, you bring in KJ Martin, a guy who's proven he can play at the NBA level, and I think he just turned 24. So at least, not that that's a needle mover, but it's something. And you mentioned it. There is a lot of talk around here about how that actually went down, and if Danny knew, and how that really did play out. I'm excited to learn a little bit more, if we do learn a little bit more about the inner workings of the Luka Doncic trade. All right. Kyle Kuzma, the former Ute, DeLon Wright, the former Ute, both of those guys played in the Sweet 16 here at the University of Utah. They both got dealt on deadline day. Kuzma to Milwaukee, DeLon to the Knicks. Both of those two teams contending for the playoffs. Any movement, any needle moving with those two local guys?
Yeah, I mean, look, Kuzma's hard to assess right now because he hasn't been on a team that had any hope of doing anything in so long. Right. And I think a lot of people are kind of down on him or off of him just because he's become a guy who looks like he's just going for his numbers and not really doing much at the defensive end and all this. I think people need to remember that, and granted, it's hard to believe it's been 5 years, but it was 5 years ago that Kuzma was a really key part of the Lakers winning that championship in 2020. And he was a guy who could score, who could shoot, who could rebound, and who could defend multiple positions at his size. And, he's going to a team in Milwaukee that is really trying to get itself back into contender status and has two superstars to play off of. Like, Kyle Kuzma can't just say, I'm going to get mine on a team like the Bucks, the way that he could in Washington, where there's nothing to play for other than yourself. So, I'm sure the Bucks are hoping they're going to get the best of him. He's still, a really talented player in his prime. I like the move, and it did cost them Chris Middleton, who's a really talented player and was a key part of the Bucks championship. But the word around the league is essentially that Middleton is pretty well cooked. Obviously he's had a ton of injuries, and there's a lot going on there. I think the Bucks just kind of realized we've reached the end of the road, and they got a younger, healthier player. So it's a good move. And then DeLon Wright with the Knicks. So the Knicks have severe depth issues, or at least did, and I think Thibodeau's been riding his starters pretty hard. They could use another spry, healthy body there who's been around the league, knows how to win. I think it's a good move for them.
Howard, we appreciate your time. I'll let you get to it. I know you're in the bowels of the Barclays Center, and not the place for a radio interview. We'll set you loose and let you get to the hoops.
Appreciate it, fellas. Take care.
Thanks, man.
At Howard Beck, of course, at The Ringer, and on this here radio program each and every Friday, the Daily Assist, the NBA Daily Assist here on The Drive. I'm with him, Tony, on a lot of that stuff with the Luka deal. Yeah. We're gonna learn more about it, or we're gonna see Luka go to LA and learn from LeBron and maybe change some. That's the hope. Is that LA wants to put a tail on his career that he maybe isn't thinking about right now? Because that's the thing. I talked about it there and kind of played devil's advocate where, yeah, he comes into camp at 260, isn't in shape, but he's there at the end of the year. That's fine for now. But when you're 31 and you're on a Supermax deal, that's a different story. Right. And I think that's the bet that the Mavericks are making, and it's the bet that the Lakers are hedging on.
Well, sure. And he's a transcendent talent. I mean, he's unbelievable.
Undoubtedly.
It's unreal watching him, and I'm sure that the Mavericks had their disappointments with him. When you're winning, and even then it's irritable, but when you're not winning at, conference championship level, it's not irritable. It's infuriating. And so whatever the issues were behind the scenes between the two, when everybody's reaction was, how could you possibly trade a guy who's 25 years old who does it? Oh, yeah, absolutely you need to. If you feel like that the good is never going to outweigh the bad to the point that this is going to get worse before it gets better, and you can see that happening. Like, I 100% believe that's what Danny Ainge saw with Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, whatever the dynamics were, whatever was going on behind the scenes, he could see that, the rinse and repeat was not going to get them where they wanted to go. And so to get such a haul for each of those individually was remarkable. For the Mavericks to get nowhere near as much as I think they should have been able to get for that, that's the stunning part. Now, for Luka, you go to an organization where LeBron's not going to play forever. You could be a huge part of the face of the franchise there in a place like that in another era when the page happens to turn. And in the meantime, be a championship level and be a key part of that altogether. I'm with you. Going forward now, Luka needs some self-examination.
Right.
Okay, the self-examination is you're getting away with some things. And I've seen that in my career being around NBA players. I've seen them have some issues and they get away with it long enough and just enough that it actually keeps them from being what they possibly could have been. I don't think that Deron Williams was as good as Luka, but that was my issue with Deron. I felt like Deron he was so good, but he was getting away with some of these other issues and some of these other things.
Well, that's documented.
For long enough, yeah. And I think he would, and by the way, he's been very open and honest. And yeah, and you could see that. And I think it's, Luka's still so good that he could take a team so far, even with some of the issues that he has. So I think the Lakers now, as you said, they're hedging on that. They're saying like, okay, man, different chapter of your career. I don't know what it is in terms of diet, focusing on the entire 24/7, 365. Maybe being around LeBron James can help with that. I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot that goes into that.
And still all of that included, if that is your concern, you're hedging your bet now on a 32-year-old Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving.
Yeah.
Long term. Which to me, okay.
Yeah.
If that is your concern with Luka Doncic, I like Anthony Davis. And when Kyrie is right, I love what he brings to the floor. But I just don't see how that works out.
There was
either.
so much more.
It's very odd.
There was so much more out there. Yeah, I mean, there are teams out there who would be willing to say, wow, you know what, we'll give you this. I feel like he's a key part. Even the Lakers alone. I thought Howard pointed that out really well.
Oh, yeah. Even within the Lakers, you could have brought a whole different return back. It's interesting. I wonder, Tony, if there is something that something maybe specific that Nico Harris and the Mavericks told the Lakers about Luka, maybe medical, maybe something there that brought the price down in exchange for not opening this up to market.
All I know is
that is the only conspiracy that makes sense to me. Is there anything? Is there an MRI that we haven't seen? Like that's it. That's the only thing I can think of.
It's gonna be something like that, because if not, you're looking at a scenario where you can say, and by the way, Jazz fans who want to see their team winning sooner rather than later, I got it. I'll listen to you there. But in terms of giving something up and getting something back,
right?
I mean, you got a GM that just you never feel like, wow, we could have got more.
Yep.
I mean, if you were to tell me 60% as much as the Jazz got with Donovan and Rudy, when it was known there were issues, I would have been like, that's pretty good. When I saw just how much they got, I thought, man, that's remarkable work. So the other thing I'll say about the trade deadline, I don't think it could have worked out better for Jimmy Butler. I never saw it working out quite that well, especially with the 2 years added on. I'm going, my gosh, man.
Them giving him more money, them giving him more time on the end of that is a win for Jimmy Butler and his agent.
The one I'll say is the Bucks with Kuzma. I like the Bucks for Kuzma. I don't know if I like Kuzma for the Bucks.
Okay, that's fair.
And I like Kyle, but I'm going, wow, Milwaukee.
3 years ago, I would have really liked it.
Agreed.
Kyle Kuzma today is a different player than he was. When you're a 6'9" wing whose value in the league is based on, of course, your ability to create on the offensive side and knock down shots, but also your ability to match up physically with other front court players. That downhill slope, it comes quick.
Mm-hmm.
And, Kuzma's not quite the guy he was 3 years ago. The DeLon Wright one I like in New York as a Knicks fan. That's a versatile guard. Always room for a guy like that on your roster as long as he is healthy. We're going to go to a break, and on the other side, Paul Pugmire, Utah Golf Radio, a quick PGA Tour leaderboard update, and then we'll turn it back to some Super Bowl chatter, Jazz post-trade deadline, Utes, whatever else comes up on the Big 12 side, and more on the drive. No Spence Checketts today. I am Porter Larson, the usual host, or the usual producer of this here program, and filling in with me today is one Tony Parks, the voice of the Bees, and a radio veteran here in the market. Appreciate him for being along and appreciate you all for being along for the ride. Back on the other side, Paul Pugmire on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Welcome back in. Drive time on a Friday afternoon. Porter Larson, Tony Parks, filling in for Spence on this Friday ahead of Super Bowl 59. It's the Chiefs. It's the Eagles. You can hear it right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Of course, ESPN700sports.com. A busy weekend on the station. Of course, that one on Sunday. Coverage beginning at noon all day long. You'll hear Super Bowl coverage brought to you by Westwood One. But on Saturday, well, you've got at 6 p.m., Knicks and Celtics on ESPN Radio. Before that, Utah men's basketball at West Virginia. Tip-off at about 3, pregame at 2:30. Utah women's basketball, they're at 1:30, pregame at 1:15 over on our brother station, Hank FM 101.5. And before all of that, from 8 to 10 a.m., every Saturday here on the station, you hear it. It's Utah Golf Radio, brought to you by our friends at Uinta Golf. This is the PGA Tour Leaderboard update. And we got a special guest on the line for this one. Paul Pugmire back on the program. It's been a minute, Paul. How are you?
It has been, and I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. Good to get you back on the station. It's been quite a minute. What's the latest in the Utah golf world? Obviously, we'll get to the locals. I think it's only Patrick Fishburne in action down at the Waste Management. But give us the latest in the I guess off season. There's not much golf weather going on here in the Beehive State. Maybe down south.
You know, there's the Weather Channel makes it too complicated. There's really only two kinds. There's golf weather and there's good golf weather.
Okay.
What we have today is just regular golf weather.
That's fair enough. I've seen as a guy who's worked multiple golf courses as golf, member services or golf outdoor guy or in the pro shops. I have seen very dedicated golfers in Utah. I'm talking about snow, sleet, rain. Sometimes there are certain guys that everyone loves to get out and play under the sun and have a good afternoon and some good weather. But there are certain guys, Paul, that they will not let anything stop them from getting 18 holes in, including Mother Nature.
Kind of thrive on the challenge, thrive on being more gnarly than the weather is that day. Yeah, I totally get it. I used to be that guy, but I've backed off a little bit.
You gotten soft, is what you're saying.
I have.
Like all of us.
Yes.
That's the way it is, man.
All right, Paul, what Waste Management Open down there in Phoenix. Let's first off give folks an idea who are apparently a decade behind, an idea what the Waste Management Open is and why it's a little bit different than a lot of the tour events that we see.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I appreciate the question. Let me go back in a little bit more than a decade. The course was developed in the 90s. Well, started in the 80s, came online in the early 90s. I was living in Phoenix at the time, and back then they used to have this promotion where with an Arizona driver's license you could play it for $12. So I played it a lot. Those days are well gone, but it was fun while it was happening. They built that course out of just countertop flat land. And so you look at what's on TV now, and it's hard to imagine how incredibly flat the original land was, but it was. And they built it, they call it the stadium course. At TPC Scottsdale, there's actually two courses. It's a 36-hole facility. The stadium course was built as a stadium. All of the topography, all of those mounds you see, all of the amphitheaters that you see around the green, they were designed and built to look natural. They were built. But as a result, you have this course which is designed to hold people and to move people. And then, as a result of that, you have this venerable tournament on the PGA Tour, the Phoenix Open, which morphed into this party on grass because the golf course could hold so many people. Seriously, a few 100,000 people. It was designed for that from the beginning with all of these amphitheaters and then pathways to move around the course. even when there's 100,000 people there, it's easy to move around. It's an astonishing thing because it's built for that. So it was designed from the beginning to be a high attendance event. And then from there, you add in a couple of bottles of beer, and it's just become raucous to the point that the people who run it, it's a local civic organization called the Thunderbirds. The Thunderbirds have instituted rules this year to dial back the alcohol consumption, to dial back the kinds of things that they'll allow, to dial back the number of people on the golf course. They're limiting the crowds a little this year. Now, saying that, they're limiting it to 80,000 on some days. Good land. That's like 2x the most attended golf tournament otherwise. But it has become this just incredible experience to where people who really don't care about golf, but they're looking for the best party around, the best party of the year, everybody goes to the Waste Management at TPC Scottsdale. So half the Phoenix Valley is there every year, and it's really an amazing thing. Now, the golf course is really, really good. So that part is fun, and it has produced great champions over the years. And it almost always produces really compelling golf. You just don't see anybody run away with this ever. It is one of the best stops on the tour each year.
Oh, that's really good. And Scotty Scheffler, I know yesterday, had all the fireworks. My goodness, 2 eagles, but then he also had the double bogey. He had some bumps and skids along the way. Today, how about that? Just solid, steady 5 under. That was the type of game that I think really gives me the belief that he could be a big-time player in this thing throughout the rest of the weekend.
Well, absolutely. Look, Scotty's already won on this course twice, so he's looking for his 3rd Waste Management title. But his round today was the quintessential Scotty Scheffler boring great round. He put it on the fairway. He put it on the greens. He made a couple of putts. When you were all done, you go, "Oh, holy cow, that was 66." And it was totally Scotty.
Boring great round. That's all I want. I want one boring great round in my life.
Paul, no Tony Finau. Correct me if I'm wrong. The only local representation down there today is Patrick Fishburne. What's the story there? This is a tournament that Tony, I know, has enjoyed playing in the past.
Yeah, and Tony has done well here. He's had a lot of high finishes. He actually was in a playoff with Webb Simpson 3-4 years ago, whenever it was, not too long ago. And Simpson, twice in a row on the 72nd hole and then on a playoff hole, he made incredible left-to-right downhill breaking putts on 18 to beat Tony in the playoff. One to get into the playoff and then to beat Tony. So hats off to Webb Simpson, but Tony's been so close in this. I don't know exactly why he's not there right now. I do know, in general, 2 things. He's still, I think, coming back from knee surgery. He played well at Pebble, but it was cold and wet, and maybe he just needed a week off after that with his knee surgery. Plus, his kids are getting to the age where they have so much going on. Any given week that Tony's not there, he might just be being a good dad at any time.
That's probably the case. Obviously, Tony is a guy that works a lot and maybe just taking some time with the family. That is usually the case when he's not playing in a tournament. He plays a lot of golf over the course of a calendar year. We'll obviously next week, Paul, we'll check in. We'll have a winner for the Waste Management Open next time we chat with you. But we'll also be looking ahead to a Genesis Invitational that includes one Tiger Woods. He's committed to play in the Invitational at Torrey Pines, of course, just outside of San Diego. This is one where it's partner with the TGR Foundation. It's just outside of Palisades. Listen, this is a one with a lot of storylines, but I think the main one is the return of one Tiger Woods. Give us the latest. I don't know if you've heard any whispers. We know that Tiger is now a unofficial part of the Utah Golf family. That's in the works. So give us the latest on Tiger World and what you expect to see from him at Riviera.
Sure. At Torrey and yeah,
Torrey, sorry.
One thing, yeah. So when I saw that Tiger was playing at Torrey, my first thought was he just couldn't stay away. He's won on this course 6 or 8 times, and he knows he can win. And with Tiger, that's always what it's all about, always. And I really think that Tiger's looking at this and he goes, how do I stay away from this golf course? It's my own tournament that I'm the host on, and I know I can win on this course. I'm going to go peg it and let it fly. It's going to be so hard for him, so hard. Torrey is still a challenging walk by the time you get from the holes down by the cliffside overlooking the ocean back up to the clubhouse. It's a bit of a challenging walk, and so. Can Tiger do that come the weekend? I hope so. I want to see it, but I need to see it before I say he can do it.
Yeah, at this point, that's kind of where we're at with Tiger. Yeah. He lost his mom this week. How much do you think that has to do with him maybe suddenly wanting to play a little golf? I know that his parents were as much a part of his professional sports career as maybe anyone that we've seen in that sort of limelight.
Absolutely. Coltita Woods is one of the more important, although very quiet, people in the arc of the history of the game in the U.S. She knew from early on that she was raising the GOAT, that she was raising a kid with all of the tools to become the greatest. And she raised him, and she raised him to be that, and she raised him to handle it. I think she is a remarkable person, and she's very, very quiet, stayed away from the spotlight her whole life, but we cannot not give credit to Coltita Woods and what she did to help Tiger become Tiger. In terms of why exactly Tiger's going to go ahead and play, man, I wish I knew better. I maybe his mother's death plays a role in that, where he's thinking, no, I want to go honor her because she raised me to be who I am. That would be kind of cool if that was the way it was.
All right, Paul, we'll set you loose. We'll catch up next week and talk a little bit of Genesis Invitational on the PGA Tour leaderboard update.
Let's do it. Can I just throw something real quick before I roll?
Absolutely, and let us know what's coming up on Utah Golf Radio too.
Yeah, exactly. And that is tomorrow on Utah Golf Radio. We're gonna be hearing from Todd Miller, the director of golf at Brigham Young University, about a really big time win the Cougars got this week. Pretty amazing. They're down in Tucson at what they call the National Invitation Tournament, whatever. Anyway, they beat a good field. They spanked a good field that included top 10 teams in the nation, and they had half of the top 10 individuals. 5 of the top 10 were BYU Cougars. It's really cool. We're going to tell that story tomorrow.
Paul Pugmire, Jan Brownstein, of course, our friends at Utah Golf Radio. You can hear it right here on ESPN 700 tomorrow at 8 a.m. Paul, appreciate your time as always.
Thank you.
Thomas Detry, your leader. Alex Smalley in at second at 10 under. Tom Kim at 9 under as of right now at the Waste Management Phoenix Open, as we mentioned, down there in Scottsdale. Adam Hadwin.
Man, Detry, 7 birdies today.
He went 7 under, the low score of the day, moved up 3 spots. Of course, Scotty Scheffler also on moving day. He is 7 under for the tournament, 5 under for the day, moved up 19 spots, now at top 10 going into the weekend. Still some guys out there on the course. The projected cut line still down there at 2 under. Just under that cut line, Patrick Fishburne. We're going to see if he's able to make it. He's through 14 on the day, the only local representative on the PGA Tour this week at the Waste Management Phoenix Open, which, of course, even though it's called the Phoenix Open, it's in Scottsdale. On the other side,
the way it is,
Tony Parks and I will continue the Super Bowl conversation. It is, of course, a football Friday. We'll preview the Eagles and the Chiefs in the big one on Sunday. Of course, you can hear that game in its entirety and pregame, postgame, all of the above on this station, 10 hours of game day coverage on Super Bowl Sunday on ESPN 700, and brought to you by Westwood One. We'll also discuss the local ties, Tony. That's what we'll get into on the other side. The local ties in Super Bowl 59. Which way are you leaning? Which local guys are you pulling for in the Super Bowl? We'll get to some Jazz rest of season talk on the back half of the hour with Thurl Bailey. We'll do a little Super Bowl with Thurl as well. Ask him what he's feeling as we go ahead to Super Bowl Sunday. That segment brought to you by our friends at Harmon's. Valentine's Day 2025 is coming up. Say it with flowers this Valentine's Day. Every arrangement crafted by a Harmon's floral designer. And they've got surf and turf deals for you and your partner. Double R Ranch Beef, Prime, Choice, and Wagyu available. Miss Kavanaugh's chocolate-covered hearts made locally here in North Salt Lake. Choose from mint, caramel, peanut butter, or custom just by asking a Harmon's Bakery associate. Locations and info at harmonsgrocery.com. Back on the other side, more of The Drive. Porter Larson, Tony Parks filling in for Spence on this Friday, just ahead of the Super Bowl, right here on Utah's #1 sports talk. It's ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. to the city of New Orleans will go this weekend for Super Bowl 59. Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Kansas City Chiefs in the big game. Of course, you can hear all of that right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We'll preview Super Bowl 59, discuss the locals involved therein, and go from there on this here segment. Porter Larson, Tony Parks filling in for Spence Checketts on this Friday. We'll call it a Football Friday for now. And Tony, we had Thor Nystrom on a little bit earlier, but you and I haven't had an opportunity to really go back and forth on this one. Where are you leaning with your head first and with your heart second in this football game? I know we talked about it a lot. We talked about it a little bit with OC. Do you cheer for history? Do you cheer for players you have an affinity for?
Yeah.
What's your connection to this one? Kansas City, Philadelphia, Sunday coming your way. 12 o'clock, noon, the radio coverage.
All right, so my heart is with Kingston Suamataia and with Andy Reid because I like him.
Yep.
I mean, I can't help but to root for Andy Reid. You can't help but to love the guy. But I root against history when it comes to like the teams. Most times, unless it's somebody to break a record against a team I hate, something like that. But usually, if it's a team, like I rooted against the Patriots when they were going for 19-0, I just liked
that's
that
easy
it
to do.
never happened, right? And so I'm rooting against a team to win the Super Bowl 3 years in a row. There's just something I've loved about the NFL that it's so incredibly hard to do. When it's an individual going for a record, most times I actually root for the individual, whether it's a hitting streak or, some home run record. I rooted for McGuire and Sosa. And so those things, usually I'll go for a root for history when it's an individual against it when it's a team. So I'm actually rooting for the Eagles, I guess, in this game. But in terms of prediction, I go 26-23 Kansas City. I've said it before. I think Steve Spagnuolo is going to be the true MVP of this game with the timely. I think Thor broke it down beautifully, talking about it as well. The timely, disruption and timing that instead of a big play, it turns into a decent play. Instead of a positive yardage, it's no yardage or a timely sack or negative play to hold him to a field goal or to keep him out of field goal range. Whatever it is,
right?
You just always feel that when the deck of cards get distributed with the way Steve runs his defensive game plan, you just always feel like the odds are in their favor. And if you really, really want to get into, and I know we don't have to get into this, the whining and crying about the officiating benefiting Kansas City, I have no problem. I always tell them, you know what my theory is, because Andy's so good at playing the cards into his favor, and Steve is so good at playing the cards into his favor, that when Kansas City gets a break, it's perceived as much bigger than it is. Whereas if you watch the Bears and Lions on Thanksgiving Day, the Bears got away with a false start that led to a touchdown, a delay of game that led to a big gain that turned into a touchdown. They got away with all sorts of mistakes, a big hold on the outside, which turned into a chunk play, which helped them tie the game. But nobody cares because they lost that game. So Kansas City does so many things that don't hurt themselves, and they play the odds so incredibly well with good coaches. When they catch a break, and because they win a lot, everybody perceives that they have been benefited more by officiating than anyone else. Every team's catching breaks.
They've also been playing a bunch of close games, Tony.
Right.
And you know that these missed calls or perceived missed calls or calls that you disagree with, well, you don't really talk about them if the game is a two-score game.
Yeah.
If you're in blowouts, if you have games that are decided before the final couple of minutes, you're not talking about phantom pass interference calls. You're not talking about the scales of the game being shifted in the favor of one team because of the officials. And frankly, I have seen nothing that would point me to believe that there is like some bias towards Kansas City.
Right.
They go out there and execute. They go out there and are just finding ways to win. Now, you guys know I'll happily bring up stuff when I'm questioning stuff like that. Woody Dixon in the official booth with the Pac-12. We can go back to this year during college football. There were more moments this year during college football specifically where I saw instant replay review officials get it wrong, clearly get it wrong in situations that could have benefited certain teams in certain positions. I'm happy saying that out loud because I saw it with my own eyes. I've yet to really see that with the Kansas City Chiefs.
No.
I've yet to really see it in the NFL. And going into the Super Bowl, I have no reason to believe it'll be a huge effect on the game. That being said, are we talking about it on Monday? Maybe.
No, I mean, it's possible. I mean, what, you had the pass interference or defensive hold that was big in the game between Kansas City and Philadelphia last time. Mm-hmm. Now, what it did was it meant that KC could truly have the final say with a field goal with about 12 seconds left. And there's no doubt. I wouldn't have called it there. They got a break. Do we know if Philly drives down and ties it or wins it? No, we don't.
We have no idea.
So we don't know that. But yes, did they catch a few breaks in the game against Houston? Yeah. The story was that Houston absolutely could not handle the defensive pressures that were being brought by that defense, Kansas City. That's actually – so if you ever want to point to a call, if you ever want to point to officiating being a facet in the game, I've seen it where it has an impact that's pretty big. But that game wasn't the game to point it out. But ESPN would show replay after replay after replay. You would think they were the only 3 plays of the entire game.
Right.
And then to hear coaches and players after the game sit there and be like, well, it is what it is. You come here, you're never going to get a call. You're never going to get this. You're never going to – stop. Just stop. Just stop. I'm not the never complain about officials guy because I've definitely seen games marred by officiating. No doubt. I've seen it happen. I just think it has been – monster in the closet mentality when people have been complaining about it with the Chiefs stuff. But anyway, 26-23, that's where I'm going on this game. I think defenses are going to do a great job of holding the opponents to a lot of field goals.
Well, I think part of the officiating thing, the reason that one of the reasons folks like to point there, number one, just conspiracy-related stuff in general is seems to be very popular, very in at the moment.
Yes.
But outside of that, you mentioned it earlier, is you don't want to see the same people win all the time. You get tired of it. Now, I'll say I find the Chiefs and Andy Reid and Mahomes and Kelsey a lot easier to cheer for than I did the Patriots. I think that's different. I don't know that everyone sees it that way, but I do think that there's a difference there. I think that more people would be okay seeing the Chiefs win. Maybe the addition of Taylor Swift and the kind of merge of pop culture and the Kansas City Chiefs helps along with some of the fandom there. But I'm seeing nationally a lot of love for the Philadelphia Eagles, which I don't know if I necessarily expected. Now, I'm a Cowboys fan, so you know where that's coming from.
Yeah,
but
I know exactly.
I've never seen the nation, and you look at the state by state who's cheering for who, most of it's Philly. And I don't know if I would have expected that.
I do think some of it is rooting against history.
Yeah.
But I absolutely think some of it is I think you have to find a way to hate Kansas City. I don't like this about them. I'm like, no, they're fine.
Winning a bunch, beating your team.
To not like Andy Reid. It's not like Andy Reid has this brash,
he is
post-game rant.
Forget football. He is one of the nicest human people you'll ever run into.
Ever. So my heart is like, yeah, if you win, man, I'm going to be really happy for you. And then I watch everything else about, I do think when people bring up the Kelsey and Taylor Swift stuff, they'll have the sick tired of seeing Swift on TV all the time. It's barely there. It's overblown.
Oh, yeah.
And then when people tried to run with the narrative of men can't handle women being involved in football, I mean, there's, I think, a shred of truth to that. The bigger thing to me is people hate others having something good happening for them, and they absolutely have to draw into the cesspool of negativity. It couldn't just be that something good is happening to somebody. I think people have been way overblowing their negative energy towards them because deep down, I think a lot of people are, if you were to really uncover it, they're miserable and unhappy, and so they have to find a way to express it.
And you mentioned the Taylor Swift stuff. There were people, the people who get on and complain about seeing her too much. It's the most famous music, one of the most famous music stars in the world, dating a player. It's just ripe for the NFL to use it. And even then, Tony, I think I saw a stat where she was on the screen for less than a minute total during all the broadcasts. It was 40 seconds or something. And to me, if you're the one who's pausing the screen and taking a picture, and then going to social media and tweeting negatively about it. Like, look in the mirror, dude.
Right.
If during the 40 seconds that is what you're focusing on during the big game, yeah, you can go scream to the echo chamber on social media. We'll let you do that.
It's the negative energy. It's just that's the way it is.
Like you said, though, speaking of the positive energy, it's really hard to cheer against Kansas City. When you tie in the local elements that I'll do here, that makes it even harder. Andy Reid, of course, a BYU guy. He spent a lot of time here in the state, from the coaching tree that we know of. That's the main local connection. His son is there as well, his son Spencer, and he is a Utah grad, a BYU assistant at one time. You mentioned Kingsley Suamataia. He is currently a rookie with the Kansas City Chiefs. Siaki Ika is currently on the Chiefs practice squad, of course, of East High School. Chiefs quality control coach Alex Whittingham, former Utah linebacker, and of course the son of Coach Kyle Whittingham. I'm sure Kyle will be on the sideline. I think he's been there for both of the other Super Bowls. And then Porter Ellett. Porter Ellett is a quarterback's coach and former assistant of Andy Reid, a BYU kid, a Utah native from down there in central Utah. You guys have heard Porter on this station. We'll get him on again. And he is the guy you'll see on Andy's right-hand side without an arm. Remarkable story from Porter Ellett to not only be involved in the sports world after losing his arm, but as a kid, he actually competed without an arm in baseball and basketball and wrestling and was like a legit athlete. Now, of course, the the left-hand man of Andy Reid in Kansas City. 6 local ties for the Kansas City Chiefs, which also makes it tough to cheer against them if you're here in Utah. But the one local connection for the Philadelphia Eagles, which makes it tough for me, is Britton Covey. Mm-hmm. You go about this business, Tony, and you know as well as I do, there's certain guys that you'll have an affinity for. There's certain guys that you'll work with in a larger capacity than others. There's certain athletes that'll go out of their way to not just work with you in the media space. Thurl Bailey, who joins us in a little bit, is a good example of a guy that you're probably closer with than maybe other particular athletes. Britton Covey is completely unrelated to sports, one of my best friends in the world. So for me, a Cowboys fan, I am somehow on this February 7th cheering for the Philadelphia Eagles on Super Bowl Sunday, and doing so with no regrets.
I am cheering for Philly. The other thing I love about this matchup is I feel like we're gonna have a great game, like we just are. The last 17 Super Bowls, 14 of them, I would put into the category of great game.
Yeah,
and
we have been lucky.
Probably have at least 9 of them legendary. Like, I mean, where it's like down to the final moments, you don't know who's going to win. You're on the edge of your seat.
Crazy comeback.
Coin toss.
28-3.
Yeah, 28-3 comeback. The comeback by Tom Brady and the Patriots, down 10, 3rd and 14 against a defense that gave up 4 meaningful touchdowns in the previous 8 weeks since Bobby Wagner returned to that Seahawks team. That was actually a very underrated comeback, by the way, to beat that team. And obviously the Malcolm Butler interception is what's remembered most. The power outage is remembered most with the Ravens and 49ers, but that was the first time ever that the losing team in the Super Bowl scored more offensive points than the winning team. It was the Giants, statistically the worst team to ever make the Super Bowl with their dramatic win over the Patriots. That was in their second matchup. Their first matchup was arguably the greatest Super Bowl ever. I mean, Pittsburgh and Arizona was tough to argue against among the very, very best ever. It's just, you love it. The iconic moments, the pick six, with Peyton Manning trying to drive down for a game-tying score, right?
Yep.
And Tracy Porter. There's so many of these great things. The last 3 Super Bowls have been decided by 3 points each, and every one of them right down to those final inches and moments. It's fun, man. The Super Bowl has delivered, whereas it's unique. We had different childhoods. My childhood, you would get 3 out of 17 Super Bowls that were good. I mean, they were awful, man.
Bunch of blowouts.
Every year, man, you could just count on some massacre out there that, it was just a dud. And when you had a good one like the Giants and Bills and Scott Norwood's missed field goal, it felt as rare as it really was. You could feel how rare it was. So it's great to have that. I'm excited for this game Sunday. And I just think, especially with everything that goes into the legendary status and the Rushmore level, recognition that a guy like Andy Reid could get, I think he goes into the pantheon of absolute greatest offensive minds ever. He's on my Rushmore anyway, but he starts really climbing his way up into greatest offensive minds in all of football historically.
Yeah. No, there's no doubt about it.
Not just because of the rings, but also the years that I thought he overachieved with McNabb, overachieved with Alex Smith. No disrespect to Smith. Just got a lot out of him.
What do you mean?
Yeah, it just got a lot out of him. It's cool to see it now move its way into championship validation, biggest stages. I'm curious to see what that guy has up on his sleeve with a 4th and 3. In case the chess match with this, as Thor was talking about, is every bit as much fun as the excitement of this game.
And a lot of these players have been talking about the three-peat since last year.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just a Super Bowl. This is a bigger thing that the Chiefs have been building towards. Would be the first time in the Super Bowl era, 3 consecutive years with one champion. The Chiefs looking for history on Sunday. I'm assuming you have your television watching experience dialed in. I'm assuming you have your cable figured out and your satellite. You've got the game set to record. All of that's probably figured out for the Super Bowl. But I will tell you also, and this is a real story that happened to me this week. Things happen. Things come up, including your landlord cutting your internet. They cut my internet line at my. I'm not going to name the company, not going to name the folks, but they cut my internet line, right? So I had to workshop around. I got to figure out my streaming. I've got to figure out my hotspot, how to connect it. Well, if any of this sounds familiar, and on Super Bowl Sunday, you're maybe scrambling to get your TV watching experience dialed in. You don't know what channels to find the games on, or maybe you want to set up a different experience where you've got the game on here, you got some multi-view, you've got streaming here. Well, Ryan and the folks at the Dish Professionals can help you with all of that, and they can take money off of your bill. Ryan, tell the folks what you've got for them on this Super Bowl Sunday weekend.
Yeah, definitely. That's probably the best part is the offers right now. They are so good. They are so good. Listen, if you're listening, all the services are going up. Prices have gone up from Fubo, YouTube TV, Netflix did a massive rate increase. Everybody's raising their rates, and it's just going to get more expensive. And you don't want to deal with this. This is an interesting theory that I haven't experienced because I don't have this. My son told me this. Is that his friends will get mad at their dad when he's watching the game because it's using up all the internet because he's streaming it. Guys, listen, if you're running into issues like that or if it's digitizing or slow, we've got great internet solutions, but I've got an awesome TV deal right now where Dish will set you up with credits, huge offer for 2 years, price is guaranteed not to change, and we're going to throw in Netflix free for the next 2 years. And with that rate increase, now that's worth $430+. Call us up, take advantage of that. Plus, about 60% of the customers that are calling in, we're able to actually find, through this new database we have with Dish, that you got an offer in the mail. And it was a pre-qual offer, and you got a gift card, but you probably didn't see it because it was thrown out in the mail. Well, we're going to do a little research and make sure that we dial that up and set you up with a big fat gift card on top of that. So listen, stop overpaying, stop going with an inferior service, get the best deal out there, let us hook you up and have you installed as early as next day. So it means tomorrow we'll have you set up, and I'll throw in dinner at JCW's on top of everything. Guys, free stuff, money in the bank for you. You just got to call 424-DISH, 801-424-3474.
That's 801-424-DISH to get in touch with Ryan and the folks at the Dish Professionals. Of course, maybe a little late if you're still trying to figure your stuff out for the Super Bowl, but get them on the line. If nothing else, maybe they can take some dollars off of your home internet, your cell phone, and your TV bills by combining them all together. Of course, it's Ryan and the folks at The Dish Professionals. That segment also brought to you by our friends at Ogden Clinic in Hadley Dermatology. Looking for expert skincare? Dr. Michael and Jason Hadley, along with their skilled team, offer a full range of dermatology services such as anti-aging, body sculpting, laser treatments, injectables, and more. Whether it's general dermatology, advanced Mohs surgery for skin cancer removal, or cosmetic treatments, you're in great hands at Hadley Dermatology, hadleydermatology.com, or at 801-657-5664. Schedule your appointment today at hadleydermatology.com. Back on the other side, Thurl Bailey talking some NBA trade deadline. We're even going to ask Thurl, the hoops guy, about the Super Bowl, and we'll go from there on a Friday edition of The Drive. I am Porter Larson. That is Tony Parks filling in for Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. It's ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, and of course live up on YouTube. Welcome back in Drive Time on a Friday here on ESPN 700. It is a football Friday, but we're taking a little break from the football conversation. Chatting with our guy, Big T, Thurl Bailey, reacting to the NBA trade deadline, talking a little Jazz and more. But as I mentioned, it is a football Friday. It is Super Bowl weekend. And even when our guest is a former college national champion, former NBA player, and many other things, to be clear, a very talented Thurl Bailey, we're still going to ask him about the Super Bowl. Big T, how much does it move the needle? What's your football fandom look like, especially on a Super Bowl Sunday?
Well, my dad was a Redskins fan growing up because I was born and raised in D.C. And so I think the highlight of my life, and I think part of his, was when I was traded from the Jazz to the Timberwolves. The Super Bowl was in Minnesota. And the Redskins were in it. So I flew him out, and he got to see his team in the Super Bowl. And but I grew up, I liked the Redskins, but I ended up, sometimes people don't believe this, like I jumped on the bandwagon. But I've been a Kansas City Chiefs fan for a lot of years now. I mean, almost 9-10 years, and even became more so when a good friend of mine named Porter Ellett, you need to look that name up.
We were just discussing Porter on the show.
Oh, were you?
I know him well, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I knew Porter when he had his accident. I went to visit him in the hospital when he was a kid when he lost his arm.
Just as you were playing with the Jazz, yeah?
I was.
Okay.
Yeah, and my wife, being from Richfield, knew their family and asked me to come down, and then his story is amazing and just made me a stronger Porter Ellett fan. And then, obviously they started winning, so I wasn't about to jump bandwagons. But, yeah, I'm a Kansas City guy.
Thurl, you interestingly have so many great, deep connections to this community. I mean, you played here. That's one thing. But you now are known so much for, what you give to the community, the way you give of your time. I know I've experienced it personally, and you and I have been a part of different things before. But you have really flexed the muscle in terms of community outreach and engagement. But your authenticity and just ultimately who you are is what has drawn so many people to your kindness and what you've been giving. When did you feel that this place, the state of Utah, Salt Lake City, was really congruent with your personality, your heart, and your overall desire to help others?
Well, first of all, T, it's good to hear you, man. Good to talk to you. You and I been friends for a long time. You're little T whenever we're on. I'm Big T, right? Don't forget that. So
Big T, little T.
Yeah, Hot Rod would always have Big T, Thurl Bailey.
That's right. Well, I think it's always, I think the community embraced me early on in my career. There was a changing of times for the Jazz. We were starting to win more, and from a fandom point of view, I think the fans were always there. But I'm not sure I realized it until I left. I was traded, and then I came back with the Timberwolves and got just a fantastic welcome. But ultimately, it was when I was away for a while after I went overseas, and I came back for my last year in the season. I walked through the tunnel, and I got a standing ovation from the crowd.
Yeah.
And then I knew it wasn't just for my basketball play. I knew that was a lot of it, but I felt it was deeper than that. And so for me, it kind of sealed the deal that the community appreciated who I was as a player, but even maybe more so the person I tried to become as someone in the community.
So when I was a kid, I used to hate the fact as a junior Jazz player, we would always get the tickets to see Minnesota. That was the only team we would ever get to see, and it was always frustrating because it was like, man, why do we always get to see them? But then you were there, and it changed everything. And I remember how excited I was to go and see that. And I definitely remember how warm a reception the fans gave to you. So it's always great to see you. Obviously, you and Jazz basketball together. People know the statues outside, and they know so many of the personalities from Hot Rod Hundley to Jerry Sloan. But I think when you think the heart and soul of Utah Jazz basketball and what it means in this community and, you have to be here and be around here to know what I'm talking about, and I know you definitely do. I think nobody represents that better than yourself. So anyway, it's always something I thought you'd have a chance to express.
I appreciate that, too. Appreciate that a lot.
To expand on that, Thurl, just your Utah connection from a different point of view. I remember when I was a young, I want to say 6, 7 years old, and my dad and I, we ran into one John Stockton out in the city. And I'm not speaking badly of John. I'm not besmirching John, but let's just say it wasn't exactly what a fan experience. What would you like if you run into one of your heroes out on the move? Now, we weren't disrespectful. We didn't try to waste his time or take much of his time, but it was just it was dismissive, and we were a little bummed by that. My dad and I talked about it in the car as we left, a little upset as we leave. And then a week later, we see a Big T Thurl Bailey, and I'm still a young kid, at the Home Depot, in the aisles of the Home Depot. Not only, Thurl, did you take like 15, 20 minutes to stand in the halls of Home Depot and talk hoops with me and my late father at that time, you helped us take heavy stuff to our car and continued the conversation. I'm sure it's long ago, and I'm sure you've had a bunch of these different types of memories, but it left an impression on me that lasted throughout my entire life. As I went to Jazz games, as I watched all this, and then eventually got to meet you and do this thing on the radio every once in a while.
Well, I appreciate that. And let me say, just off the beginning of that, is that you will never meet a kinder man than John Stockton. The one thing John was not comfortable with was stardom.
Right. Which is understandable.
I didn't have the kind of stardom that John Stockton had. And so for a guy like that, who's always been a gym rat, just wanted to play the game without all the accolades, he just was not comfortable with it. And a lot of times it would come off as dismissive.
Right.
Or maybe mean. So, but, John and I still talk today. I love the guy. He's one of my best friends ever that I've ever had, not just within basketball, but outside of it as well. But, there's different approaches. There's different things that, I promised my mom years ago that I would always take the time, even if it was inconvenient for me. I'd always take the time, because it wasn't about me
right
at that point, right? It was about maybe how I could touch a person's life for a few seconds, and they would remember it or whatever. But that's the world we live in, man. I mean, it's what you sign up for, and you may not like it on some days, and it's your choice how to react or not react to it. But I just chose to, for the most part, make it a favorable experience. It wasn't always comfortable or convenient, but it didn't have to be, something that person walked away with a bad memory.
Right.
I saw John at a college basketball game. I called just about a week and a half ago, maybe, and he was very gracious with the fans that were there. I mean, everywhere he goes, he's going to draw some attention and stuff like that. But you could tell that it still may not be something that, he's overly cut. He'll do it, but you could tell it doesn't. There's something about that and having that he wanted it to be about his son. He wanted it to be about anything else other than, but he was still good with the fans.
And just to be clear, no one is entitled to your time. No one, whether they're a celebrity, a famous athlete, is entitled to go out of their way for a fan of any kind. And I didn't want to, never would feel entitled to their time. It just was, it was the way that Thurl went out of his time.
Oh man.
He
does it every time.
For some random kid from Oakley, Utah, for way more time than he needed to do that. It was super cool, and it left a pretty good impact on me. You and also the late Mark Eaton. I got to know Mark, being a Park City local, really well before he ultimately passed, and both of you made me feel really small and in another way, really big, which is super cool.
That's good.
I've never felt big around Thurl Bailey, especially when he swatted my shot in the 16th row of the stands. And as the crowd oohed and awed in front of a bunch of junior Jazz players, and crowd got a good time out of it.
Your fault.
Yeah, I did decide. Okay, so long rebound, and I've got a full head of steam thinking, all right, I've got an easy layup here.
Yeah.
I've got everybody behind me.
Fastest guy on the floor.
And then on the back angle at a 45 degree, I see these long strides coming at me, and I'm thinking, all right, but I'll probably win this race. And then maybe 2 steps later, you realize, oh, I'm not going to win this race. But then I thought, what the heck? It's for the kids. Let's see if I can score on Thurl Bailey. No, that ball was in the 15th row in the blink of an eye, and the crowd oohed and awed. They had a great time with it. And I'll never forget a little kid sitting in one of the close rows before we inbounded going, Mom, that guy sucks.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah,
you just needed a pump fake there, TP. You just need a pump fake.
Oh, no, he would have handled that. He had it dialed in on me. I wasn't going
Obviously,
anywhere.
he didn't work on his three game and mid-range game.
Well, the inbound, I had a 3-pointer out of the corner. That's a different discussion. But that's the part of the story we don't tell.
All right, Big T.
It's a different era, kind of a Jazz basketball, right? I mean, this is I know that there's kind of a unique approach when it comes to the patience that would be needed overall to take the long game to winning big. As you watch kind of young players, as you see so much happening night in and night out. And you look at all the different eras of Jazz basketball, you see what the Jazz have in front of them, picks, assets, things like that. You take this in day to day, and you always have a great perspective of it. What are the biggest things that kind of jump out to you as you kind of digest everything that is Jazz basketball in this moment?
Well, I think if you're watching Jazz basketball and you're part of the Jazz Nation, and you don't understand what the blueprint or what the plan is, then you should understand that that's where you need to start. And this team is really trying to develop the young guys. They're trying to put themselves in position to, get a playoff spot and potentially vie for a ring in the next few years. And the only way, really, that you can do that in the market that we're in, I believe, is to go about it in this way, in this long-term way. And Justin and Danny have really tried to make that clear. And I know it's not a pretty thing to do. It's not easy to do. But I think when you can see progress, like if you couldn't see any progress, it's a lot more frustrating. The arenas aren't as crowded, but Jazz Nation's seeing progress. They're seeing what happened against Indiana, albeit a loss. We were in the game and seeing what happened against the Warriors in clutch time. And so that's why they're still hanging on. That's why they're still loving Jazz basketball, is because they understand where we're trying to get to. And so it's been interesting to watch as a former player, veterans come out and buy into the plan and raise their value along the way. Trade deadline just ended. So for guys to come out like John Collins and Jordan Clarkson, Colin Sexton, and understand that they have to develop these young guys as well as, raising their own value, I think it's something that's happening. And it's a crazy business, as you guys know. So, we're at it again tonight with a team who tried the free superstar route, and it doesn't seem to be working out well for them. So it doesn't work all the time. And you have to be fortunate and lucky, but I think the Jazz are on the right track.
Thurl, you mentioned the trade deadline. What was your big picture reaction first to the Jazz involvement in the Luka Doncic trade and that trade big picture? And then around the league, what was maybe the most active trade deadline in modern NBA history? At least as you talk about bigger names, it's on the upper end of that list. How did you intake trade deadline day and how the Jazz involved themselves?
Oh, I think everybody was shocked about the Doncic Anthony Davis trade, and I think even part of it more than the trade itself was that nobody knew, but just a few people, right? And in this day and age, it's hard to do. It's hard to keep that under wraps. But, you know, you have to make your own opinion about who won that trade. It was certainly unusual with the Mavericks, you know, going to the finals recently. And so that just shows you that, you know, that this is the business of basketball. And as a player, you always are like, I don't know if it's pins and needles, but you always wonder if you know, you're going to be moved, right? And I'm sure it's no different than on this team. I'm sure players were kind of wondering and thinking, well, is something going to happen with the Jazz? But, you know, as somebody who's been in it and been involved in it and has been traded, it doesn't surprise me as much as people who are kind of entrenched in the real business of it, if you will. But, look, the Jazz are who they are right now. Even though the trade deadline's over, there's off-season coming up. So we'll have to wait to see if something happens then.
You gave me a story once about how one of the biggest ways you had such a trust and a love for Jerry Sloan was he took you to dinner once to let you know about some of the things that were coming and why he was trying to kind of go to bat for you, if I recall that right.
That's true.
During a moment in your career, do you see something like that being a part of today's NBA with that transparency and with the way the business is now?
I hope so. I just thought it was unusual back then for a coach to, you know, to sit down with his players and say, look, there's possibly something happened. I just want you to know. I thought it was really big of Jerry to do that. Mm-hmm. It was in Miami, actually. And, you know, so it wasn't like a super serious blow. I know there's, in this day and age, there's, you know, the possibility of players busting up a trade or something like that. But yeah, I mean, in this day and age, I think it happens more that players kind of get that trust, even though it's a business, get that trust in GMs and coaches and just talk reality. This is the reality of the business. So, you know, I think there's a communication there that should be there.
Mm-hmm. Big T tonight in Phoenix. You got the Suns at 8 p.m. What are you expecting to see from the Jazz? Maybe not from X and O standpoint, but as you mentioned, there's always a different feel post-trade deadline after you know that you're not on the move or you're staying put, or, you know, maybe players that have been moved. KJ Martin, of course, the only addition for the Jazz. But what are your expectations for a matchup with Phoenix tonight?
Well, you know, you never know what's going on in that locker room and what will motivate a team or what will just continue to be a problem in the locker room. So I just know that the Jazz need to have some carryover for how they've been playing the last few games. I think they can do that. I think they're really consolidated on the buy-in as a team, and so I expect them to go out and go out and try to win this game. It's off a back-to-back, so the first quarter is going to tell me a lot about where their mindset is and how much carryover we will get from that Warriors game.
Big T, we know you got to run, get to that arena, and we'll see you on the television screen here momentarily. Thanks, man.
Hey, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Big T, Thurl Bailey.
Big T, Thurl Bailey, and his ever-loving best.
Love that man. One of the greats in Jazz land, of course, on the floor and in the community and on the broadcast. All right, Tony Parks on the other side, a PGA Tour leaderboard update, and then we'll set you loose for the 5 o'clock hour. Still to come, Thor Nystrom, Howard Beck, and today's best. You'll hear from Sean O'Connell's show, Mikey and Bill Riley. They joined the show earlier today, so still some of that on the station to come before 7 o'clock. It's Amber and Ian on ESPN Radio, and then a busy weekend on the station. We'll give you the schedule for that. On the other side, it is The Drive. I am Porter Larson. That is Tony Parks, and this is Utah's #1 sports talk. It's ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. rolling along on a Friday. It is drive time on ESPN 700. Porter Larson, Tony Parks taking you through it. Of course, Football Friday, Super Bowl Sunday, just around the corner. The Chiefs and the Eagles going to battle for the Super Bowl title, and the Chiefs going for Super Bowl superiority 3 in a row. It would be the first time in NFL history a team is able to do that. Tony Parks, Super Bowl traditions. What does it look like in the Parks household? How's it different this year? What does it usually look like when you wake up on a Super Bowl Sunday morning?
Man, it's a big holiday in our family.
It should be a holiday.
Yeah, it really, really is. We used to have a big Super Bowl party and stuff like that. And then over time, more and more people got less interested in the game. Right? And we're not snobs. We're not saying you have to be able to break down every defense or something like that. But it's a smaller party. And you know what? If the number one reason you're there is the commercials, we're not going to dislike
not a good
it.
match.
It's just not. Yeah. Like we're just, yeah. So, or we get really into the history of the game. We're really passionate about that. And I'm not saying anybody else's party is not good to go to. I'm just saying, like, for us, we definitely geek out on the game.
I am kind of a football snob, so
yeah,
I'll not proudly, but I'll cop to saying, like, if you're not trying to watch the game, and like, I'll even skip commercials for the sake of seeing certain replays, seeing certain reviews, trying to figure out what's going on. Like, I don't care about the Doritos commercial.
Yeah,
I know it's part of the thing. I'll see it on social media if it was funny enough. I want to watch the football game.
Right.
More so on February 9th than at any point during the rest of the year. Football.
Right. So the one that always jumped out to me was, here's John Elway trying to win his first Super Bowl ever.
Mm-hmm.
The Denver Broncos trying to win their first Super Bowl ever. They're tied at 24. Of course, we're going for Denver because we hate Green Bay. And the whole entire time, we're hearing a story about why somebody hates their boss. And we're like, okay, all right, look, there's 109 to go in this game. You
right.
can, how about after the game, you can go off about this. But right now, I want to hear Dick Enberg and Paul McGuire, and I want to see what's going on here. And then the other one that we had was, somebody going off about some story, and it's Tom Brady and the Patriots in their first Super Bowl that they ever won. And I know it's been a few years, but these were kind of the giveaways that, man, these games are getting good, and they're getting ruined by these situations.
Yeah.
By the wrong person in the room talking about something totally obscure while we've got history happening right in front of us.
And listen, no judgment. I'm glad that there are people that are not football people.
Totally cool.
That are interested in the game, that are joining us for this ride. But yeah, when I'm sitting down on that Sunday, I want to be dialed in. I want to be. My family's always wondering, like, why don't you want to party with us? I'm trying to watch football.
Well, if somebody would have walked through and stepped in front of the TV, and I know I'm coming across snobbish with this, on the David Tyree catch,
right?
I would have no. I mean,
someone's kid's bugging you. The dog is peeing on the floor. Like
my mom's living room. I mean, we were going off, and I literally said out loud, if they drive down and win this game, that's the greatest play in Super Bowl history. And initially, everybody was like, nah. And then later on, it's like, actually.
Might have been.
No, actually, that would be, because if you get sacked, you're fourth and forever. You're probably not converting, yada, yada, yada. It was so cool to go through, like, those Super Bowls, the Super Bowl 43 with the Steelers coming back on the final drive to beat Arizona.
Right.
The pick six, Tracy Porter. The Packers hanging on to beat the Steelers, whatever. The second time of the Giants. But, like, all these great games kept happening. And it was like, man, this was really enjoyable. The conversations in the room and it just fit for more of what we wanted. It's not that we think you have to know everything about the game. But if you're talking about the Doritos commercial and we've got Colin Kaepernick driving to try and beat the Baltimore Ravens and it's 34-29 and it's first and goal at the 6, or you start ranting about something through a Malcolm Butler pick at the goal line, don't ruin those moments for us, man.
Maybe we just need headphones. Maybe we just need headphones and just be alone on Super Bowl Sunday.
Yeah, if you're talking about why you hate this certain type of dip, in the middle of Vinatieri's game-winning field goal, it's not going to sit well.
The show today brought to you by our friends at Uinta Golf, worldwidegolfshops.com, 560 East, 21st South. Also locations in Sandy, Riverdale, and Orem. This one brought to you by TaylorMade. The new TaylorMade QI30 5 woods are the fourth generation of carbon wood technology, a driver that unlocks a new level of distance at Uinta Golf and Uinta Golf Shops, worldwidegolfshops.com. Of course, 560 East, 21st South, and locations in Sandy, Riverdale, and a champion will be crowned 48 hours from right now. Super Bowl 59 comes your way Sunday. Of course, you can hear it all right here on ESPN 700. Radio coverage coming your way at noon. All day, you'll have Super Bowl 59 coverage here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. The spread, as we speak right now, 1 point. Tony Parks, between Kansas City and the Philadelphia Eagles. The Chiefs, the favorites out of Vegas as we speak. And obviously we've covered this back and forth throughout the show. That's the way that I continue to lean. But, man, my heart's trying to talk me out of it. Although it would be cool to see, as we've talked about, the history of a three-peat. I'm pulling for my guy Britton Covey and the Philadelphia Eagles. The 1-point underdogs, 48 hours from Super Bowl 59.
Yeah, I'm rooting against history. I like that no team's ever won it 3 years in a row. I mean, 59 years of having the Super Bowl. It has. I mean, this is the 59th. It's never happened.
Never.
The Packers won 3 in a row, but one in the NFL championship era and then the first 2. So that's unique. And those long winning streaks of championships, they would usually happen in eras that were just so far into the rearview mirror. So a three-peat that would happen in baseball, that we're talking the Yankees.
Also, when there was like 8 teams, 7 teams in some leagues,
yes, like
it's a different game.
Where the Celtics win 8 in a row, right? And you're thinking, okay, well, there's no 3-point line, no
you
3-second
You
rule
beat 5 other teams.
Way to go. So, but to your point, I love that the NFL's built not to do this. So if they do it, big tip of the hat. Just same thing
sure.
with Belichick and what the Patriots did. The league was built not to allow it to happen. The league was built not to allow this to happen. So if a team's going to do it, I want it to be Andy Reid. But I'll tell you what, Andy, sit this one out, and then you get the next 2. How's that?
That's kind of how I feel about it. I like a lot of the Chiefs. I like a lot of as we've talked about, the local ties there. But, man, I like they've had theirs. They've had theirs.
Right.
Now, as a Cowboys fan, saying that as the Philadelphia Eagles are their challenger feels a little wrong. But again, Britt Covey there, the former Ute. I will say I had a few people ask about the Covey situation. He's been on IR. He's been off and on. There was some reports that he was practicing this week, and he was practicing a little bit this week. But from what I can tell you, very, very small likelihood that even if Britton Covey dresses, very small likelihood that he would play. He's dealing with some neck stuff,
right?
Dealing with a sprain and some nerve stuff in his neck. And although the little guy is campaigning, it does not sound like the Philadelphia Eagles doctor is going to let him play. If he were, it would be an emergency holder situation far before it's a returner situation.
Right.
Just to get that out there, just to get the expectations in line, because I did have a few folks asking about one Britton Covey. Kept it pretty quiet around him, hopefully to get back to full strength this offseason and get back to it. Regardless, though, he will be there. He's on the sidelines, and he'll get a ring if they win as well.
Yeah, that'd be great to see that happen for him. I mean, I think in this game, it's going to be tight. It's going to be great. I think the coaching matchup is a lot of fun. I've mentioned it. I think the difference will be the timely defensive calls that are made by Kansas City that create the disruption in the timing of the offense, and then whether that ends up being, an inch here, an inch there, or a timely sack, TFL, or even just, causing a quick throw and an incompletion to set up a third and very long. Whatever it is, minimizing damage, I think Steve Spagnuolo is going to be great at that, and I think it's only going to increase the chances that Kansas City wins the game. So I've picked 26-23 KC.
You've said you think he's going to be the MVP. I think that if Kansas City wins, he has to be. And the reason I say that is just because Philadelphia has the recipe.
Yeah.
If you want to beat Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, you don't turn the ball over. You control time of possession. You run the rock a bunch, and then you convert in the red zone and get 7 instead of 3. Because when you trade 3 for 7, you lose to the Kansas City Chiefs. Mm-hmm. They find a way to get 7 on the board, even in times when they're struggling to move the ball. We talked about it in the last Super Bowl, Tony. They found a way to get 20-plus points on the board, only scoring offensively, one time?
Well, they had one.
Before the final drive?
Yeah, their longest, they had one touchdown drive. It was 16 yards, 13 yards.
Yeah.
It was a muff punt that set them up. So that's kind of how they got by.
Get 7 on the board, escape the weird stuff, and you give yourself a chance against the Chiefs. If you give them the ball with 1:12 and you're up by 4 and you've traded 3 of those drives for 3 points, I'll tell you what, you're asking for a loss if you put Patrick Mahomes in a position to win the game in the last minute. I'm with you. I think the Chiefs pull it out, and I think we see history. I'm going to go 24-21 Kansas City, just under the under. And most of that is because I do believe the over-under's at 48 right now.
48,
so,
okay.
48.5. Because I do think that Philly tries to slow the game down and run the ball a lot. And for that reason, I think we see a little bit under the expectation there. And I think we see a Kansas City Chiefs win, although I'll be cheering for somehow NFC East compatriots and the Eagles.
To your point, if the Eagles win, I think Saquon Barkley's the MVP. I don't know if he has a Timmy Smith game with 204 yards, which he didn't get the MVP of that game, by the way.
He's also within like 30 yards of Terrell Davis for the most yards in an NFL season. Postseason
Interesting.
Included. He's really close to that.
Obviously, that would be special. I really like him. I got to see him in his one of his earlier college years. It was at Michigan, Penn State at Michigan, and Michigan just torched him. I think it was 49-10. But I remember thinking to myself, man, that Saquon Barkley guy is pretty good. And lo and behold, he's gone on to do this. He's one of the most enjoyable people to have a chance. See, we talk about the good people that are involved. Man, this guy's the most unselfish teammate, wonderful father, great person, just everything about him. Good family guy. There's so much to like about Saquon Barkley. So rooting for the Eagles, rooting for Saquon, rooting for a great game, and I think we're going to get it. We've been spoiled in this era with great Super Bowls, and I think this one will be great as well.
Tomorrow, Utah Golf Radio, 8 to 10. Utah Women's Basketball, 1:15 over on Hank FM. 2:30, Utah Men's Basketball at West Virginia, right here on ESPN 700. That is followed by the Knicks and the Celtics on ESPN Radio. And then, of course, on Sunday, it is Super Bowl 59. The Chiefs and the Eagles, brought to you by Westwood One. Kickoff at 4:30, but coverage all day long right here on ESPN 700 starting at noon. Join us for a Monday show. It'll be Tony Parks and I once again recapping Super Bowl 59, talking a little jazz and going from there. Omar Ruiz of NFL Network, Robert Johnson, the former Tennessee Titan, and more on a Monday show. For Tony Parks, I am Porter Larson. This is The Drive. No Spence Checketts today. We'll fill in today and on Monday. Thanks for joining us. Chat with you after the weekend and after Super Bowl 59 right here on Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, and ESPN700sports.com.